Welcome, everyone. Monday, July 11th, 2022. This meeting is now called to order. Councilman Kwati, please lead us in the flag salute. Please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Mrs. Kraus, please read a statement of public notice.
Take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with NJSA 10:4-8 and NJSA 10:4-10 as follows. Notice of the meeting was prominently posted on the bulletin board at the municipal building located at 225 Main Street, Little Falls, New Jersey on March 11, 2022. A copy of the notice was mailed to the North Jersey Herald and News and the Record on the same date. Additionally, a copy of the notice was filed in the office of the township clerk on said date. A link and a telephone number to join the meeting virtually can be accessed on the township website at www.lfnj.com. Electronic provisions have been established for the public to participate during the public comment portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Kraus. At this time, please call the roll.
Councilmember Hablitz, Councilmember Kawadi,
Present.
Councilmember Sieber, Councilmember Vanchery,
Present.
Council President Scoba.
Present. Can I have a motion to open the meeting for public and all matters, please? So moved. Moved by Councilmember Vanchery.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Kwati. This is a voice vote. All those in favor do so by signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to this motion do so by signify by saying nay. The motion carries. Mrs. Kraus. Mrs. Kraus? I think we lost her.
Yep, no, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Can you read the public comment?
Sure. Anyone wishing to address the Township Council may do so through the Council President. Please give your name and address for the record. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes. However, if appropriate, you may be granted additional time in the sole discretion of the Council President. Members of the public who have joined the meeting virtually and desire to provide comment shall raise their virtual hand in the Zoom application. The meeting moderator will cue the members of the public that wish to provide comment, and the Council President will recognize them in order. Members of the public who have joined the meeting by calling in must press *6 to mute and unmute themselves and *9 to raise their hand. Members of the public who have joined the meeting via the Zoom application must click the reactions icon and then the raise hand icon. Please give your name and address for the record. Once the process is complete, we will return to the regular order of business.
Thank you. So for the public, I know Mr. Fernandez, you attend these meetings all the time. We hold 2 meetings always in the summer, but this is the first time this governing body is going to do this open township council meeting as a town hall style. As you can see by the agenda, the only thing that is on is to listen to the residents' comments, questions, or complaints. So now the floor is open. Oh, can I have a motion to open to the public? Oh, I did that, right? I did that. I'm sorry. So now we are open. The floor is open.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Albanese. You don't have to say your address. You could just say your name.
I'm sorry.
You do not have to say your address. You could just say your name.
Al Atanisi.
Good evening.
Gentlemen, this evening, I'd like to talk specifically. I want to make reference to the mayor's letter, which I believe came to every taxpayer with regard to the third quarter payment. And in it, you made reference to what many in town would consider overdevelopment. You touched very briefly on children or students and the effect traffic very, very briefly. You also made mention of the fact that we were looking at dilapidated houses and properties, which I wholeheartedly agree with. The statement that I do take exception to is that you also mentioned that part of the redevelopment program we're currently embarking on had to also look at and repair our aging infrastructure. And it's that particular issue that I'd like to speak to this evening. James and I have been in contact from January the 30th of this year, back and forth, at least 17 emails. The subject of our discussion was my inquiry with regard to a planning board meeting regarding the Singac project. The meeting was held on January 3rd, 2017. Both our mayor and our council president were there for this particular meeting in their positions as members of that particular body. During that meeting, our then town planner, Mr. John Janota, made a comment with regard to that particular project and stated for the record that the sewer system, sanitary sewer system for that would service that particular project was built in 1926 and in need of repair. I'm quoting him directly, and in need of repair. He went on to say that the pipes of that system were made, again, I quote, of cast iron and also in need of repair. I followed the meetings from that particular date till the date that the approval was given, looking to see how first the planning board and then this administration addressed those what I consider very serious concerns. Again, to Mr. Mayor DiMiano's credit, he did answer each and every one of my emails. Unfortunately, he never gave me the answer to the question that I posed. And that, again, specifically was the age and the condition of the sanitary sewer system. James did tell me that there were plans afoot, at least at that time, they may have already been completed, that new valves were being put in place for the pumping station at William Street. Well, that's fine. But my question had to do with what's my problem is, or at least the way it was outlined by Mr. Janota, is getting that waste material to that particular pumping station. James did say to me, I guess it was at the final, what he would call a response and an answer. He calls it a response, I call it a response, but I don't call it an answer. Was that our engineering firm, the one that we have here in town, has equipment which can snake into the system. It's got to be a pretty damn long snake if it's got to go from here on Main Street to the pumping station where it's eventually going to wind up. But be that as may, I'll take that as a fact. The question is, now we have people moving in there. Last I heard, there were at least 12 and maybe as many as 30 people occupying those particular townhouses, especially. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyone who knows, give me a better number. But the fact of the matter remains that people are now moving in. My question here tonight is, have we done that snaking process? And if we haven't, why not? And also, the point remains that even if it has been done or we intend to do it, and it has to, I think, as soon as we possibly can, because we're going to have more people using that system. The fact of the matter remains that we're being reactive as opposed to proactive. Nothing, no comment whatsoever was made by any member of the planning board to address those particular concerns that directly affect the health and the welfare of the citizens of this town. And I'm open to any more information that you people can give me.
Thank you, Mr. Albanese. Mayor?
Sure. So first of all, we have an engineer who they televise the lines. In order to do so, they jump manhole to manhole as they televise between. So there's not a 600-meter stretch at one time.
Gotcha.
It's usually 50 meters at a time, et cetera. So they do have equipment that's able to televise lines, at those distances.
I am unsure if Boswell, our engineer who has been assigned to televise lines throughout the entire town, has done this particular section yet. I can follow up and get back to you on that. What I can tell you is that the best information that we have regarding our sewers and their capacities come from our sewer maintenance individuals within our DPW who are literally in the pump stations as there are storms and as there are regular day-to-day flows in and out of them. So it is the engineers, I'm sorry, so while we have engineers who will be televising lines, there's not an issue where there's such a blockage that's causing backups at this current moment. When there are, those are known very quickly. They happen from time to time throughout the entire town, and lines are typically jetted to fix that issue. As far as the aging infrastructure, certainly Little Falls has some sewers that were built over 100 years ago in some sections of town. This particular section of town approaching the 100-year mark.
1926 to be
Absolutely.
exact. Yes.
And they are, but the area that you are referring to, fortunately, has cast iron pipes, as you indicated, unlike some sections of towns where we have clay pipes. And it's the clay pipes that are in more imminent danger of failing or collapsing or having problems than the cast iron pipes. As they age, they obviously do lose some of their integrity. But we have not had any issues. And according to the individuals who are in the sewer pump stations from day to day and during storms, we are not at capacity anywhere near in those particular areas. In fact, something that most people didn't know is that the ice machine that was used at what was Rainbow Caterers within that redevelopment zone, that particular ice machine apparently used to dump thousands of gallons per day of water. And again, it goes into the sewer system. It's not necessarily wastewater, but it was clean water into the sewer system that has come offline while this has gone online. And that used to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, generating ice. So that has come down, so certainly offsets some of what will be some of the new capacity. But again, the sewer pump station is not at capacity or over capacity based upon the individuals who are there. They are adding additional gauges to continue to monitor to ensure that that is not the case and that we never exceed the actual capacity of the pumps. But one of the things, and again, one of the reasons why the statement was made by our town planner, Jeff Janota, at the time, is because at the time we were negotiating the sewer fee that the developer was going to pay to the municipality at the time of their approval. And of course, part of the municipality's position is we want additional funds to improve our sewers, our sewer lines, and to make repairs throughout the municipality. Those statements were also made, and again, not untrue necessarily, but were made in an effort to ensure that we received maximum dollar amount from developers. And we received, I believe it was $973,000 in change from this developer towards our sewer fees and connection fees and in our I&I, which is our inflow and infiltration fees that we can use to make repairs and improve the quality of the infrastructure in town.
The monies that were given by this developer, are they being earmarked and almost put in an escrow specifically for this particular potential problem?
So no, and I tell you why, because I do not recall the year long before I was mayor or even on the council. A prior administration authorized funding of, I believe it was $1 million or so at the time, about 12 to 15 years ago, to make improvements to this particular pump station and the pipes that lead to it. So there is funding that, again, has been approved over a decade ago for this particular pump station in this particular town, area of town, in the event it's needed. So the funding is available. The I&I is used throughout town to make improvements, and which makes up about 50% of the total fees that are paid.
Well,
Mr. Outneys,
again,
Mr. Outneys,
Yeah.
I appreciate your questions, but we have 16 individuals here this evening, which
Fine.
I've been running these council, let me finish, sir. Let me finish. Been running these council meetings for 5 years, and the most we ever had was 2 people. So we have 16 individuals plus individuals that want to speak on Zoom. So we want to give them time too as well.
Just
So,
one more statement.
Go ahead, sir, but
James and I have gotten into a parsing of words and sentences, as he well knows. And again, he brought up the fact that our town engineers, et cetera, have brought up, and he uses the word capacity. I have a problem, and my problem is, and this is what we've been banging heads back and forth about, I'm talking about the integrity of the system. Capacity means how much we can hold, how much, right? I have no problem with that. I'm talking about the integrity of the system. So
Thank you for joining us this evening. Mr. Crucio, can you let Mr. Barone in?
Yes.
Or Mr. Barone, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm sorry, my video is not working, or I would let you know I'm on location walking the path on Wilmore Road, which is significant for a reason.
We're quite careful there.
What's that?
Be careful.
I'm being careful. Thank you. As I'm walking down this path, a couple of questions about this particular area arose. I used to live on Wilmore Road, and now we live on Viewmont. You probably saw us. I know I've seen you, Anthony, a million times. I walk this path probably twice a day, every day of my life with my dog. Few questions came up. I seem to remember in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was you, Mayor Damiano, made a comment that the rest of this road from Prospect to Lindsley was going to get sidewalks at some point. Is that still in the works? Is there any update on that?
Yes, actually, the municipality received a Safe Routes to School grant from the state DOT that has been recently approved for a sidewalk between, again, on Wilmore, between Prospect and East Lindsley there. So we do have an engineer that is beginning to design that project in that area there, and we can get that project underway. I don't recall the exact amount of funding that we received from Safe Routes for that particular project, but it was substantial and should cover a majority, if not all, of the costs to install that sidewalk. It's certainly somewhere that there was a safety issue. We have a number of kids because of the new state regulations that don't permit busing or don't provide courtesy busing if you live within a mile of the school. We have a number of kids who live on Douglas and the other side of Francisco and East Lindsley there who try to walk to School 1, and crossing that intersection and then walking along Wilmore to School 1 is certainly a dangerous walk. So getting a sidewalk installed there is something that we certainly think will help improve pedestrian safety there.
I couldn't agree more. That's great. You also gave me a pretty good segue about the traffic light at that same intersection. I know that was discussed last year and I think approved. If I'm not mistaken, it was some kind of split with Cedar Grove. I'm just wondering if there's any update on that as well.
Councilman Vanchery, would you like to comment on the traffic light on Francisco there?
Hi, Mr. Barone.
Hello.
The plan is to have it up this year. Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but the plan is working with our engineers right now is to have that traffic light ready to go at Francisco, Cedar Grove Road and Wilmore. There was a little work that needed to be done behind the scenes with the engineers and the county, but I think we're to the point where we should have something timeline fall potentially, Mayor.
No, unfortunately, I think polls for traffic lights are something like 8 months out once
Okay.
they're actually ordered. And we did, so unfortunately, everything is a major process and engineers needed to go through traffic studies and speed studies in the intersection, even though that the light was already authorized and approved by this council here. There is no cost share. It is being fully funded by the Township of Little Falls. Cedar Grove is not kicking in whatsoever. No developers are kicking in. There is nothing. It is unfortunately what I would consider to be the most dangerous intersection in Little Falls, just based upon traffic data and accident reports. But it is certainly something that, again, continues to move along. I don't know the exact timeline of when, even if they're ordered today, when the lights will be installed. But it has been authorized for funding. The engineers do continue to provide sporadic updates with the process, and we do continue to try to push them along on that project.
Yeah, and just to give a little background too, since 2018, there's been over 80 accidents at that intersection. So that's why there's a need for this traffic light.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Councilman Vanchery, I've been a proponent for that from the beginning, so I love it. And the last Wilmore question I have for you in this trilogy is I'm walking on the path currently, and I've heard rumors that something was either approved or happening with the completion of the path to go over the Peckman. Is that also happening? And then I'm done with you.
Rumors, Mr. Barone, right? Well, let's talk about that. You're talking about the bridge that goes over the Peckman?
Correct.
Mayor, would you like to comment on the bridge that's going to possibly go over the Peckman that the county is trying to do?
Sure, yeah, that's a county project being fully funded by the county to connect dozens and dozens of miles worth of the Morris Canal. It is sort of one of the missing pieces in the area over the Peckman River. The county has funded it. I believe they are in the final stages. It's already been designed. I think they've actually gone out to bid already and have received the low bidder. And I believe we're in the process of or the final stages of getting it soon and installed relatively soon.
Councilman Quadri, would you like to add anything to Mr. Brown's questions?
Absolutely. My wife and son go through that intersection probably a half a dozen times a day. It is shocking to me that nobody thought to put a streetlight there and do the study and proceed with the safety upgrade that this town needed until Councilman Vanchery and the mayor really got on it and hit the gas, so to speak. I can't believe that nobody else ever recognized that this was a problem. So thank you for bringing it up. It has been our top priority getting it done, but unfortunately, sometimes government moves slower than we'd like it to, but it will be done. And not soon enough, but as soon as possible.
Mayor Damiano?
Sure, yeah, and just to add to that, this is one of those projects that the municipality, as I indicated, is funding 100% of the cost of. It is an estimated $600,000 project to install a traffic light in an intersection, particularly in this case, because it's really a five-way intersection that also spans across a waterway, so there's some additional engineering that goes into it. But this project is going to cost the municipality about $600,000. And while it's certainly a hefty price tag to put on a project like this in Little Falls, with the severity of the accidents that we see so frequently in that intersection, it's only a matter of time that if we don't do this, it could be a life. And, there's no value that can be put on that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
The floor is open. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just go up to the podium. But we do that with the Zoom. They have to raise their hand, so we know they want to
So my
speak.
name is Norman Scherzer.
Good evening.
And I want to thank you, first of all, for having this particular format tonight. It makes it a lot easier for people to speak about what concerns them. And again, I thank you. So I'm here to talk, as shouldn't surprise you, about the pandemic. Just for the record, I spent 25 years as a communicable disease project officer for the Centers for Disease Control. I was the Assistant Commissioner of Health of New York City for Prevention and Epidemiology. I've had consultancies with the Harvard Institute for International Development, with the Mayor of New York City, with the Mayor of San Juan, and I'm stumped. I can't figure out what is happening here, and I'm not blaming anybody for it. Let me give you an update before I go further on where we stand with this pandemic. I'm sure you've heard that unfortunately, the virus that drives this pandemic keeps changing. It's very rare to see this frequency of mutations. And each mutation seems to be more infectious than the one before. The current mutation, called a B4/5, particularly focused on B5, is several times more infectious than the last one. Now, fortunately, so far, it doesn't seem to be more severe. However, when you get massive numbers, even if the percentage of people who are hospitalized and who die remain the same, the numbers still are overwhelming. I can't figure out who is responsible, and I'm not blaming anybody, for coordinating an effort to figure out, first of all, what is going on. I have some questions. I wish the Clifton health officer were here tonight. He's not. And my questions have to do not just with the boundaries of Little Falls. Viruses don't care about boundaries. Little Falls has a unique situation where we house a regional high school from 3 different towns. If kids from Totowa and Woodland Park bring infections into that high school, they bring it into our town. Doesn't matter what town they happen to be in. We house Montclair State University and several thousand students. Whether those students are counted as residents or not counted as residents, and we've gone back and forth about how that works, the point is they enter our town with this infection. We have a regional problem without a regional strategy. I have tried without great success to communicate back and forth with the Clifton Health Department, just to find out how many cases we have. The last time I was on the phone for an hour. Somebody's supposed to call me back, nobody did. I've met with the epidemiologist of Passaic County and the health officer. So I have some questions, and here are the questions I'd like somebody to get the answer to. How many people in this region are fully vaccinated? I don't care whether they're a Montclair State student or a Totowa student or what have you, okay? And by vaccinated, here's what we know about this pandemic. Prior infection does not seem to be much protection. And more people, and we're watching this disease now because I still stay in touch with my colleagues from CDC in other countries. And what's happening is that people who were infected before are becoming infected again. That's a little unusual for most disease. Usually when you get a disease, it gives you some kind of immunity for the future. This new variant seems to be overcoming. And by the way, they've just identified another one after BA.5 that's coming along as well. So I'd like somebody to get us some data on whether or not people are fully vaccinated, which means 2 boosters. Because what we know so far is if you're vaccinated and only had 1 booster, it's not enough. I realize that you have a policy, I don't know how it came about, where based upon your personal preference, you don't wish to mandate vaccinations. And I can understand and I can respect it. But I want to know how many employees of this town and other towns are fully vaccinated, fully vaccinated. Now, the good thing about this pandemic is that we know a lot about it. It's an airborne disease. So what I'd like to understand is, where are the hotspots around here where people gather, including this building? And can somebody show me an environmental report that Passaic Valley and our other schools and other places where people congregate are sufficiently ventilated to protect the people who go in? It's not rocket scientist stuff. It used to be easier when I worked in public health early on. We used to open the windows, but most buildings don't have windows now, or the windows are sealed. So I want to know whether or not people are vaccinated fully. I want to know whether or not buildings have been inspected. And I want to know who is in charge. I can't figure it out. You know, I represent a group of people who managed to eradicate smallpox from the world, broke the back of polio, broke the back of childhood immunizations. And I can't figure it out. I have no idea who, if anybody, is coordinating this effort. And I'm not blaming you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not blaming the council. The problem in New Jersey is that we have a broken public health infrastructure. I left out of my resume, I used to be the regional consultant for disease control for the United States Public Health Service, including in New Jersey. New Jersey has 61 local health departments, 61. And they're providing services to 91 municipalities. Now, we're a great home rule state, but when it comes to dealing with controlling communicable disease, we're a disaster. We don't have a public health infrastructure. Several thousand of our citizens have become sick, some of them with long-term COVID, and we're beginning to learn more and more that when you have long-term COVID, we don't know what the eventual outcome is going to be, but it looks like 15 to 20%. And the latest data is showing us that if you were infected before and become reinfected, your chances of long-term COVID are even more. 18 citizens, let me repeat, 18 citizens just in Little Falls have died. Can you imagine, I sit as an officer here, if 18 citizens in Little Falls had been murdered? If 18 citizens had been hit by cars and died? 18 of us have died. And my concern is, and the reason for my passion is, more people are going to die, more people are going to become sick, and most of this is preventable. If we have good data, good surveillance data, and the mayor and I have disagreed about what data represents and what have. Let me tell you that you're absolutely right about one thing, that just simply looking at the number of case reports is not sufficient. So tell me, how many patients are in our hospitals? We have 3 or 4 regional hospitals. Every time I headed a communicable disease team for CDC, the first thing that we did when we hit an area, both in this country and outside, we went to the emergency rooms of the hospitals. And we said, who's getting sick? Tell me your numbers. Can anybody here tell me how many people are becoming hospitalized from this pandemic? Can anybody tell me how many people are actually infected? And you're right, Mr. Mayor, that reported cases are not enough. So what are I don't know, is this Passaic County? Is this Clifton? Who the hell knows? What are the testing results? We constantly do testing. And we look at the percentage of people who are infected. And when those percentages go up, even though reporting may be terrible, we get the data. You know what other places are doing around the country? They're testing sewer water. People are talking about sewage reform. And they're able to detect from the sewer water the rate of infection. We are going to be hit with another pandemic, and people are going to die and become sick unnecessarily. I want this town to create a public health council. I want you to put public health on the agenda. I want to know who we can talk to. Who's in charge? Who's our health officer? In order to get this done. So forgive my passion. It comes from a long time in public health and growing up in the Bronx. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. There's nothing quite wrong with passion. That's quite respected here. So we appreciate you coming forward. You asked the multiple different questions, but I just want to go back so the mayor and the council can answer. You're asking about how many people are vaccinated in the township of Little Falls and other towns. You're asking about the buildings, the public buildings, and even school buildings. Are they ventilated properly? And you're also asking really mainly who's in charge. I mean, I think those are three of your main questions amongst some other sub questions that you had in your conversations this evening. Is that correct, sir?
I'll stick to those.
Okay, thank you. Mayor?
Yes, so the information that the municipality receives is not secretive in the sense that the amount of people that are fully vaxxed is as public an information as there is now. I'm not privy to more information than you, I'm sure. Even especially with colleagues at the CDC. I don't know the number off the top of my head of how many people are fully vaxxed. I don't know that, even 2 boosters is now considered fully vaxxed. I don't know that everybody's even eligible for 2 boosters at this point. But so I can't answer that question. I don't know the answer to the question of how many people in Little Falls are fully vaxxed.
Who can answer it?
I don't know if that would be the county at this point or the state of New Jersey.
So what I'm asking you to do is to call the county or the state of New Jersey. It's a very nice epidemiologist in the county health department, ask them the question. CDC just changed, the FDA just changed the requirements for a vaccine. And we now have we have a vaccine for children. The data nationally is that very few children are becoming vaccinated. What's the story here? Okay, you and I have had it back and forth. I understand you don't have the information. What I want to understand is who does. And why is it so difficult to have the county health officer and epidemiologist, to have Clifton Health? We pay these guys. We have a contract with Clifton Health Department. Why can't this guy show up periodically and ask them this question? And by the way, are we doing contact tracing anymore? That was the other thing I left out.
Mr. Schwartz, if you let the mayor finish with your questioning so we could kind of get through it and then we could come back.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yeah, so contact tracing, I'm not sure that that's ongoing. I think that's been an effort that has fizzled out. I don't know that that's necessarily a local sentiment. I think that has been sort of statewide. But as far as environmental reports, I don't have environmental reports of buildings within the municipality. I don't have environmental reports of the airflow and filtration and ventilation within them. I also, again, don't know how many employees have been fully vaccinated. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. Sure, I know the information exists somewhere. I just don't know them off the top of my head.
Why don't you know? I know how many of my employees are fully vaccinated.
I don't want this to become a combative argument. That's not the
No,
point.
but
The
I'm
point is,
asking, why
you're
don't
asking off the
you
top.
know?
I don't even know the number of employees that the municipality has at this current moment off the top of my head. So to answer that question for you, again, is your, the intent is not to become combative, as I stated. I can find out and get back to you, but you're demanding an answer right now that I just simply don't have.
What I'd like you to do is hold a township meeting with the public health officials who have the answers present and give us a briefing, as other towns all around us have done, on what the state of the pandemic is and who's in charge.
Mr. Scherzer, you get a monthly report of how many cases there are of COVID from the township of Little Falls. The most recent one, I'm certain you saw it, June 2nd to June 9th, 17 cases, June 10th to June 16th, 23 cases, June 17th to June 23rd, 15 cases, June 24th to June 30th, 20 cases. We provide constant updates regarding this. Again, there's a lot of people, more people have told me, stop telling me about COVID that have asked for questions about it. Now, I'm not going to stop providing information for those that do want it. But again, I don't know that the demand for this ongoing daily or weekly updates is there. They can certainly be provided if you'd like. I can send them to you, but the overall demand town-wide is just not there. But again, I can get you whatever information you want. I might not have some of it now, but I'm happy to get you the information you're looking for.
You mean the public would have to vote whether or not the information should be made available?
No,
What-
that's
what-
not
what's the
even
vote?
slightly what I had just indicated. I indicated if you want it, I'm happy to make it as readily available as you would like. But putting it out in daily or weekly email blasts is just something that, again, I don't think the overall, and yes, so to answer your question, what I do try to do is accommodate the most, when any decision is being made within the municipality, and I'm the one that is ultimately making it, I try to accommodate the most residents that I can at any given time.
Councilmember Vanchery, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just, Mr. Scherzer, I think, you have a lot of questions and I know you've tried to reach the Clifton Health Department and, to the mayor's point, we'll see if we can get you some information. And at some point, Council President, maybe we do entertain having, the health officer come in for a session with the residents. We've done it in the past for other situations with Clifton Health Department. So if that's something that, the residents are interested in doing, we're happy to look into that. Because you're in the situation where you look at it as a concern and you want to get information, whereas others have moved on. Depending on who you talk to in this town. Some people are done with COVID, others are concerned about it. It's a valid point that you bring up. I work in the pharmaceutical industry. My job still does contact tracing and just started allowing employees that weren't vaccinated back in the office last month because they weren't allowed in for almost 2 years. So every company is different, every township's different, but I think it's something if we can look into for you, we're happy to, come back to you with an update on that.
I believe a majority of the questions that you asked today can actually be found on the state health website, the answers to those questions. I think almost all of them can be found there.
I'm sorry, the State Health Department website does not provide information about this region. Let me respond to some comment you made. I won't go into it. I have a briefcase, but I've sent over half a dozen emails to all the members of this council asking these questions and always been told we'll get back to you. Not once has anybody gotten back.
Mr. Scherzer, I don't think that's correct, sir, but fine for the record. Councilman Quaddi, any comments?
Sure. Just, Mr. Scherzer, you asked some questions about the number of hospitalizations and things like that. So right now in New Jersey, there are 933 people hospitalized. 6 people died yesterday. That's a 41% decrease over a 14-day period of the previous period. So I think that, we were in a position 2 years ago where this meeting wouldn't have even been allowed to take place. And here we are, meetings like this are happening all over, large gatherings are happening everywhere, and 6 people died. I don't know that this, and you may know better than I do, you're an infectious disease person by career, I am not. But I don't know that this particular illness and virus is going to end up being more under control than that. If it is, you would have to tell me how that would happen besides your thirst for data. So you are standing in a room full of people right now. The only person in this room who's wearing a mask is not you. So it makes me feel like you have moved towards the fact that this virus is being more and more manageable than it was at its peaks. Is that incorrect?
Can I agree with you on one point?
You can agree with me on all my points.
I think what we've seen is this thing comes in surges, okay? And we're at the bottom end of the last surge. The time to answer my questions, Nick, is to get ready, is not when it's come
Right.
back again.
Right.
What I'm telling you, based upon data from all over the world and data so far from a number of states, is that we're about to get hit again.
Right.
So let's focus
So
on the
Mr.
future.
Mr. Scherzer, let me just stop you right there. I understand what you're saying, but there are professionals that are currently employed in this field that are guiding us.
Yes, I'd like to talk to them. I'd
Okay,
like you to bring them
but
forward.
you cannot, they work for the CDC. You can't talk to them in this forum. We get our guidance from governing bodies and agencies that don't take place in this room. it seems to me that your issue is with them. And you're trying to ask us to make them behave in a way that you would like when we're listening to their guidance and following it.
I'm trying to get you to ask the health officer of Clifton, New Jersey, whose contract we pay. Let him come here.
He is commenting by providing guidance to us on a regular basis.
I've never seen him.
But he doesn't provide the guidance to you personally. He provides it to the
Total, look, all I'm asking you to do is take advantage of a lull to evaluate, work together and evaluate what is our capability for mitigating against the next pandemic surge.
I think we've seen what our capability is. I think we've seen it. 2 years ago, we saw it. We saw the efforts to flatten the curve. We saw the pushes to get people vaccinated. We know what our capacity is for mitigating this virus because we did it 2 years ago. Maybe it wasn't done perfectly, but it was done. We know exactly what our capacity is to mitigate the virus should it become more dangerous than it is right now. I think that's abundantly clear by what happened 2 years ago.
God help.
Mayor Damiano, would you like to finish this?
Yeah, I'd like to just leave it at this. I'm almost 100% confident that the state website specifically shows how many people have been vaccinated in the state. And I would just urge you to, review the information that they provide you there. And again, I don't want to continue taking up more of this meeting with this back and forth dialogue on this particular topic. I think we've exhausted the conversation. I think we've answered the questions and provided you with the information that we don't have and indicated that if there's something that we can get for you, we're happy to do that.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Schultz, can you hear me? Ms. Schultz?
I'm trying to unmute. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay. I wanted to ask some questions about the proposed new development that's going to be constructed across from the fire station off of Maple. And what I'd like to ask is, first of all, what the status of that application is. Has it already been approved? I had a chance to look at the plans, and there were a couple of things that jumped out at me that were a little concerning. Not necessarily concerning, but I'd like to know more information about. One in particular had to do with the stormwater drainage and the calculation, the way the perk test was done. There was an argument made in the application that the perk test was documenting wasn't really necessary because it was all disturbed material and there was no major infiltration capacity. And yet they were referring to the status of the property as it was when it was completely covered with buildings before the demolition occurred. And it's been vacant now for several years and the site conditions have changed. And that would indicate more surface is available for percolation and that should be reevaluated. So that was one thing that I noticed and it was a concern because as a result of the lack of infiltration capacity, the drainage system is designed with detention structures that will allow slow infiltration back into the ground where there's very little distance between the soil and the bedrock, which means there's not a whole lot of place for the water to go, except back through the ground to the street and then down to the Passaic River. Another thing I couldn't find in the plan were calculations of how much water was going to be discharged to the Passaic River directly through these detention structures during storm events. One of my concerns is we know we have flooding issues in the Passaic. We have flooding issues that we create downstream from us. And I wouldn't want that to be exacerbated by this weir that they're constructing into the Passaic River that basically discharges straight to the Passaic River. I also was curious as to why there was no green space requirement for this project. Essentially, 100% of the space that they're planning to develop is going to be covered with either buildings or asphalt. To me, that doesn't seem consistent with the net zero requirements for discharges from sites. Right now, there's very little discharge because again, there's no buildings there. Once you pave everything, that situation is going to change. Another thing I noted in that plan set was that they did their traffic study during the middle of COVID. Therefore, the traffic study isn't very accurate. We're having major traffic problems in this town for a variety of reasons. I understand the recycling of the lights. I understand that you're working on that with the county. But the argument that the park complex was not going to result in any additional traffic on Main Street is proving not to be an accurate statement. And there are only 12 people who've already moved in there. It's only going to get worse. And I'd hate to see this just become one giant traffic jam in this country, in this little town that I love so much.
Ms. Schultz,
So,
you
I'm-
mentioned the development on Maple, but I think you mean Patterson Avenue?
well, one side is Patterson Avenue and one side of it is, I thought it was Maple. I might be mistaken, but yeah, McBride. It goes all that whole block.
Right. So your questions are the Patterson Avenue redevelopment by the fire station, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Before I pass it to the council members and the mayor, you mentioned traffic and you said major traffic issues. Since 1988, I've been commuting to work from my home to my office. It's quite a long time. And I've yet to be caught in a traffic jam. I've yet to be held up going to work or coming home for work. So I always wonder where this traffic is when some residents say that we have traffic in our town.
Come to the mill.
Want to make that, comment as a personal fact. Mayor?
Come to the mill and try and make a turn out of the mill anytime during the middle of the day or on weekends. And you can sit there for 5 minutes.
So, Michelle, so first, I always do this and I always extend this courtesy. I'd be happy to meet you at the mill sometime, someday. You tell me when. I'd sit there with you for, a period of time to review this with you, to see if this is the case and what we can do to possibly address this. Now, what I can say to you is this, and you've talked about some of the development and some of the traffic that you're anticipating. First and foremost, I'd ask you in this dialogue to guess, how many units do you believe that since I have been elected mayor have been developed in Little Falls and approved by me and under my administration? Could you take a guess at how many have been approved and now developed?
In which development? There have been a number of developments.
In the township of Little Falls, how many units would you guess, if you had to guess, and again, just for conversation, how many units would you guess have been developed and approved, or I'm sorry, have been approved and developed since I've been elected mayor?
Including the park?
No, but developed, completely developed.
Well, the
As
park
in-
is
as in
already,
occupied.
people are moving in, so
I know.
that would include the park?
Sure,
I would
yeah,
say
I can-
500?
I can include that, absolutely.
500?
40 units.
Not 40 units, 500 occupiable units.
No,
Because the
no,
park is what, 300 units in it?
40 units have been approved since I have been elected mayor and actually developed and occupied. 40 units. I'll tell you the numbers. There are, I'll give them to you right now. The Walk at Stevens, 24 units on Stevens Ave, 4 units at 730 Main Street, the furthest and last building in the township of Little Falls, furthest west down Little Falls Road. There have been 12 units now occupied at the park for a total of 40 units that have been approved since I have been elected mayor and now occupied and constructed. Yet somehow the finger is always pointed at me in this council for approving overdevelopment, for traffic in Little Falls, as you have just mentioned. And I promise, circle back to the engineering issues that you just expressed on Patterson Ave. But until a week ago, there were 28 units that have been approved since I've been elected mayor and constructed. And as of a week ago, 12 more, now up to 40 total units. People say, well, what about the Abbey? That's 50 units. Guess what? 52 units were approved there over a decade ago. That application came before the planning board for just a reapproval. It was already approved. 52 units could have been built there as of right. There were only 50 that were then approved there. Again, approved 52 over a decade ago. Similarly, Autumn Point, which is now 24 units at the bottom of East Lindsley. There were 33 units previously approved there over a decade ago. They came before, they could have been built as of right because they were already approved. That number was knocked down to 24 units. 44 Main was approved and constructed long before I was even elected. So these claims that the units that, since I've been elected mayor, have created so much traffic in Little Falls are nonsensical. And I say that again, because these small number of units that have been approved and constructed since I've been elected are not adding to the traffic in Little Falls. I will not say that there are not times in Little Falls where you'll be 10 cars or 12 cars back at a traffic light. Certainly that happens. That's been addressed, I think, by the change of the timing of the traffic lights. There's certainly much better flow through town. Route 23 in Main Street intersection certainly has its own fair share of issues. That's also being addressed with the DOT, who hasn't updated the timing on that traffic light in over 2 decades. So they're in the process of fixing that as well. So these claims of traffic, yeah, if they're there at times, I'll tell you what's causing the problem. Ways as a result of Route 46, Route 3 construction. The Route 46, Route 3 construction causes massive eastbound backups. And everybody with their smartphones and Waze, I'm as guilty as the next person in Little Falls using Waze to get around when you're in an area that you're not familiar with every day. And it will direct you down Main Street from the furthest west part of town to the furthest east part of town. Little Falls residents do not create Little Falls traffic. There is, I would venture to say, no way that you've waited 5 minutes to pull out of the mill. And again, I'm happy to meet you there.
So I understand you can say that.
No, because again, and if there is, and I am misspeaking, I want to do something about that to the extent it can be done. But the finger pointing that myself and this council and the planning board since I've been elected have created this traffic is absolute nonsense. Now, to address your concerns and your questions about Patterson Ave, I certainly will tell you that it has already been approved by the Township of Little Falls, pending tons of different engineering hurdles that need to be overcome. That project is still awaiting county approval, and the engineers from Little Falls, as well as the county, are addressing every single one of those issues that you have mentioned about groundwater and runoff and all of those things. So those are all certainly being addressed. Those things, and you mentioned stormwater runoff, they all absolutely need to meet current NJDEP regulations. The project cannot be approved without being signed off by engineers as meeting all of those things.
Okay, can I?
Yes,
read-
go ahead, Ms. Schultz.
Can I please respond to something that the mayor said?
Absolutely.
Because in his discussion about how many units have been created under this administration, and that there were 2 units that you specifically mentioned that had been approved more than 10 years ago. They may not have been approved under you, but they have been constructed since this township committee has been in service. So those units from the Abbey and from the other project that you developed, that you mentioned, those roughly 70 units or so, if I counted, wasn't keeping really good track. Those are adding to our traffic today, even though they were not approved by you. And when you say that there are only 12 units at the park that have been approved and completed, they're building how many? 300 plus units? That
287 in total, which is substantially less than even the entire mill. And again, we can agree to disagree that I don't believe the mill or residents at the mill no, I take that back. Do they obviously add a vehicle to the Little Falls roadways? Yes, but I don't believe that they add to any substantial traffic backup that we see here in Little Falls. I believe the mill has 320 some odd units, almost 330 total units.
323.
323 total units there. Again, I'm happy to meet you there and spend a half an hour with you. Because if there is an issue, again, I want to have it addressed. But I don't believe that you will see any period of time where vehicles have difficult time pulling out. I've done this. I've stood there. I've watched it. I don't believe that that is a major issue that much can be done to rectify at this time.
Councilman Quadri.
Thank you, Council President. So this notion that the Township of Little Falls roadways are so close to their peak capacity that any one single development is going to just make it so that nobody can go anywhere is flawed for one major reason, besides the fact that it doesn't even take into account the Route 46 construction and traffic that comes through town by this. And the argument I would make is this. if our infrastructure is that fragile and that close to capacity, then we would have had these traffic problems that you're referring to 10 years ago. Because there were 140 additional homes in the Singac area of town that do not exist today. So if the area was that fragile, we would have seen the major traffic issues that we have, those are your words, not mine. 10 years ago, they would have gone away when those 140 homes went away. And now they would be about to come back, but not yet back because the projects that you're so concerned about have not yet been occupied. So doesn't it make more sense that the recent construction on Route 46 is causing the recent traffic that we sometimes experience? And if it wasn't due to backups on Route 46, it would be constant. I can look out the window right now and see that there's not traffic on Main Street. I have videos, I could show you videos of me driving when people say at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there's traffic. And I can show you a video of me driving from Wilmore Road through Route 23, and I passed 30 cars in total coming the opposite direction. 30 cars in a 1.5-mile stretch of road. The chief can probably tell me how far that distance is better than I can off the top of my head. But anecdotally, you may experience some traffic in Little Falls, but the marrying of that traffic to any development that has opened or is about to be built is not being done in a manner that makes much sense when you consider that we lost 140 homes and did not see a significant change in the traffic when those homes went away.
Councilman.
I would like to argue that the traffic has been a problem for more than 10 years because before the construction of the wonderful building that you are sitting in now, the corner of between the post office and you had an E rating for traffic.
But then to that point, you're indicating that the development did not cause the traffic in Little Falls. It's existed for more than a decade here in Little Falls.
I didn't make any representation that the only reason we have traffic is because of the new construction. That was only one very minor point I was making about the new construction.
Mr. Councilman.
I'm commenting we do have traffic problems and that will not help.
Yeah,
Thank you, Councilman
there's a
Vanchery.
couple things I have, but Mayor, can you elaborate on something as well that I know the police department and you have noticed too, whenever there is an issue on 46 in terms of an accident, what typically happens to our streets in Little Falls?
Oh, there's no doubt that without knowing for certain whether there's an accident on Route 46, you can tell by the traffic down Main Street. Because when there is an accident or a blockage on Route 46, particularly eastbound during rush hour, Main Street eastbound does become quite jammed with vehicles. But something that you may notice is that the vehicles as you drive down Main Street, I would venture to say 9 out of 10 of them, if you follow them from the furthest west section of Little Falls all the way down Main Street east, 9 out of 10 of them will make a turn up or down Route 23, getting out of Little Falls, then up or down, or should say up Montclair Ave. As you continue, a lot of them down Union Boulevard, as you continue further, down Broward Town Road, and as you continue all the way up Long Hill and back out to Route 46. So a majority of the vehicles that we see in Little Falls are not Little Falls residents that are on the roadways. It is those that are driving through. And there is nothing that the development is going to do to alter that in any substantial measure. And there's nothing that the township can do to prevent transient drivers from driving through the municipality using the Little Falls roadways.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, there's also a perception sometimes where right away people assume with development there's traffic, and unfortunately too, when you have social media, there's people speculating. Ironically, back in 2015, now none of us besides Mayor Damiano were sitting on the council at that time when 44 Main was on the agenda to be built. On social media, all the comments were, oh, goodness gracious, there's going to be so much traffic. Where are all these cars going to go? Councilman Quaddy, do you have trouble going to Mo and Jay's on 44 Main on a daily basis? You
Not
stuck in
so far.
traffic? So again, there's that perception right away where it's traffic. And I can tell you this, I spent a lot of time watching the flow at night with former Chief Post and even Lieutenant Briggs, where we would sit by this municipality building right here and watch the traffic that was coming down Main Street and where they would go. To the mayor's point, they were all turning left onto Union. They were not going straight for the most part. That's where it was the backup because of apps like Waze that will tell you, you get off here, guess what? You're going to save 2 or 3 minutes. And that's what people were taking advantage of to avoid certain parts of Route 46. Believe me, I did the same thing when I worked in Parsippany. I would get off early to avoid some of the traffic. We all do it, but there's always this perception like, oh no, there's a building, there's going to be so much traffic. And keep in mind too, with some of the people that will be moving in, most of them are working from home. You know, not everybody is doing Monday through Friday anymore. Most people are doing maybe 2-3 days a week. Some are even doing 1. So not everybody is traveling. And some of those people may be commuters or they're taking a train into the city. We just don't know at this point. But to assume right away there's so much traffic, when I see it on social media, we've all looked at it. There's not a lot of traffic. Yes, it backs up at times for certain reasons, whether it's 46 or in the morning with schools or in the afternoons with pickups. But that's like a 10-15 minute blip and then it's gone. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you have to speak into the mic for the record.
Faith? Hold on. Just as.
I'm sorry, miss, you have to say your name.
Faith Quelly?
Thank you.
Yeah, you can. I don't know. It's, not working.
Thank you.
Uh,
Good evening.
Hi. Just about your comments. I was coming home from Costco today at 1:45. It took me 3 minutes to pull into the mill. 3 minutes of traffic nonstop before I can come in. So the idea that there's no traffic is really not true. If you want people to send you videos of when the traffics are outside in front of the mill, there's traffic all day. Sometimes it takes you 12 minutes to get to ShopRite just from where I live. So there has to be some residual effect from the buildings that are coming in with the traffic flow in town, regardless of whether it's for the people that are coming here or in addition.
It's a fair point, but Council President, if you don't mind.
Yes,
If 3 minutes is,
timed
look,
it.
3 minutes is a lot better than 20 minutes. The other thing too that we have also looked at, and it's coming soon, because with Montclair Avenue over by Main Street and Union, that tends to back up a lot because what happens is people are blocking the box. So you can't make the left off of Montclair. Sometimes you can't even make a right because the way people are catty cornered. We passed an ordinance recently where there's going to be no blocking in the box. If you're familiar on McBride Ave over by the BP and the Gun for Hire, where when you're at that intersection there, you cannot block it. We'll have the same thing there as well, because we are seeing there was a cluster, especially people coming on from Montclair to Union to make the left. They're not even going through Little Falls. They're going to Toto or somewhere else. So that's something we're addressing too with the police department to make sure that we can mitigate that issue. But there are peaks during the day, don't get me wrong, where there could be traffic, but it's not like you're spending an hour to go from one end to the town.
Depends on the day. I mean, really, I'm just questioning the relevance of it. There's people complaining of the same thing. There's traffic.
Mr. What I'm happy to do is I'll meet you at 1:45 tomorrow at the entrance to the mill, and I'll bring a stopwatch.
I have no
And-
problem with you doing that. That's
No, and I'll meet you and Ms. Schultz there, and because we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone on this, I can almost guarantee 3 minutes. You indicated 3 minutes just now.
yes, I watched it.
3 minutes of time is an absolute incredible
Well, you
amount
can
of
ask the
time.
policeman that was
to sit
outside.
still.
He was there.
So again, to 1:45 tomorrow, if you would like, if you would take me up on the offer, I will meet you at the intersection of the entrance to the mill and Main Street. And I'll have my phone that has a stopwatch on it. And we can count the period of time where you wouldn't be able to make a turn or you would.
Well, it's more times than not, is I guess my point.
Well, and look, we won't do it one time, one instance for 1 second and turn around and leave. We can do this for a 10 or 15 or 20-minute period if you'd like. And I'll meet you there at 1:45. And again, to explore this, because if that is the case, first of all, I don't know that the development in town has anything to do with
They're
1:45
working
PM
on the road
traffic
with
here.
The construction from the road, the PSC&G was doing something in the ground. I don't know what it was. but-
So if you're referring to a detour or
That's-
construction,
They just moved the lane over.
oh, so you're referring, okay, so you're referring to actual construction occurring at that actual minute while you were there.
All the time is my point. I mean, there are times when I cross the street just to come to the post office where I almost get hit because there's so much, the traffic on the road is either speeding or there's so much of it. I mean, it's happened to me multiple times where I have to move down the street, not by the crosswalk, to cross over to mail letter.
Well, like I said, tomorrow, like I said, if it is an issue, I'd like to have it addressed. So I'm happy to meet you tomorrow at 1:45 at the corner of the Mills entrance and Main Street. And again, we can explore this issue to see if it exists. And if it does, we'll see what we can do to have it addressed.
Okay, so then my next
Yeah,
question is just a multi-part. We've been talking about the development and the construction in town. There's a number.
Actually, before you move on, I just want to address your last comment. So you said sometimes it takes 12 minutes to get
Yeah.
from the mill to ShopRite. I don't disagree that it may take that
It's
sometimes.
5 o'clock. It's during the
No,
day
no,
when
no.
I work from home.
I am fully willing to concede, but that is exactly what we're talking about. Sometimes it may take you that long when there's a problem. If there was a volume issue in Little Falls, it would take you longer to do it all of the
But
time.
that's what I'm saying. Right now, without the construction, without the new homes, without the
When-
people with their cars, the traffic is already, we have traffic.
Because there's a temporary construction project happening on Route 46 that causes backups in Little Falls.
During the day?
Absolutely,
Okay,
all the time. That's
what-
that's the
what the
entirety of our
construction is.
point.
okay.
That the construction happening there, when they start going from 3 lanes down to 1 lane, the apps send people
Right,
through Little
I
Falls.
get it, because people.
Right,
come through
so
town.
sometimes that will cause you traffic going from the mill to ShopRite. So thank you for pointing that out. If there was a volume issue, it would be all of the time.
See, but I get what you're saying now, maybe that might make a little sense, but what happens when there's like 5 or 6 locations that I have jotted down that are either under construction or going to have construction, they're demolished, they're lots. What happens when those people move in? What happens with the traffic flow? You're saying it's not going to be more? Logically, it just doesn't make any sense. There's more cars. How can there not be more traffic?
Do you have a sense of how many cars it takes to cause a traffic backup from one end of town to the other?
No.
But you're making the case
I'm
that
telling
the
you it's not.
visible lots that you can see that are empty are going to cause that problem.
Okay, so why don't
And,
we go-
and wait, hold on, let me finish. And our experts that we employ when we consider these projects tell us that it is not the way you see it anecdotally, but that it is the infrastructure can accept the amount of building that's going
Maybe
on.
you should bring them to one of these meetings.
We bring them to the meetings all the time. You should come to more.
I
of them.
will. No, I have no issues doing that.
I'm at them, so.
Councilman Vanchery? Okay, Councilman, Mayor Damiano, anything else?
No, I think that was the gist of it, but I will really meet you there at 1:45 tomorrow.
I've emailed you numerous times. so-
Absolutely. No, I know. We've had a number of communications. Listen, but tomorrow, I do know that again, today, PSE&G had an entire lane closed today and we're alternating traffic. So to use today with a 1 day in the past 10 years in that location where PSE&G had a road closed down as the barometer, I think is also a completely unfair statement to
Well, I'm
make.
simply
If you
saying,
pick the day that there's a hurricane to drive to South Jersey and every road is closed, you can't say it took me 18 hours to get to South Jersey today. It may have that one time. I'm not going to disagree the Parkway is terrible every day, but you can't use the one day that there's something abnormal
why
to
don't you
use.
hold a meeting at the mill and talk to the residents there?
I've sat with the board several times. I'm happy to do that. I've
Okay,
done it.
so we can
I'm more
talk
than
about
happy to do that.
offline. But,
I'll absolutely take you up on that, for sure.
My other questions go back to the development of Little Falls. So if you don't mind, I just have a few parts to it. Main Street, the building that you've written in the letter that you sent out with the taxes. There are, you said 287 units,
283.
283.
I'm sorry. No, you're correct. 287. I'm sorry. You're absolutely correct.
That's going to be, do we know the occupancy level of the units there, of the capacity for the units total?
Are you asking about the number of bedrooms, miss?
Well, I guess so, yeah. How many people do they anticipate to live in those units? Just based on the number of units there?
There were studies that were provided at the, again, I don't have them in front of me right now. I don't recall the specific numbers off the top of my head. But
If you can.
I can't answer that right now on the spot. I can get you that
I'm
information.
willing to wait for the response.
Sure.
Patterson Avenue, we talked about the buildings that were knocked down. How many stories is that building's going to be? How many units that will be occupied in the approved building that's going up?
Sure. On Patterson Ave, there are a total of, on both sides of the street, there's inclusive of everything that was approved there, It will be a total of 80 units, both sides of the street.
80 or
80, correct, including both sides. A number of them will be townhomes, a number of them will be apartments, most likely.
And then my next question is for the Falls Theater on 23. Again, the same question, how many units, what's the occupancy level for the?
Sure, that was approved for 50 units.
And then do we know that, will you be able to get back to us with the number of occupancy for each of the questions? Because I have just a few more.
Yeah, you mean as like an estimate of how
Yeah.
many will be there? Yeah, I'm sure there's some formula that's used to calculate that number for not unconstructed buildings, because just like there is parking and, numbers and all of those, I'm sure there's some residential site improvement standard that can estimate that number.
Okay, that's fine. And then there's also the, I think it's 453, right across from Rare. There's also some construction that's going to go there. How many units, how many stories, the
That's
occupancy
correct.
level?
That's 60 units that have been approved there. That's a 55-plus community, which will be the first of its kind here in Little Falls.
And then there's a few that I just noticed just the other day, the Valley National Bank, the Kirk's Tires, there's construction right next to the library. Do we have an idea of what's going on with those?
Sure. As far as Kirk's and the gas station in downtown, there's been no plans that have been provided. There's no idea what will go in those particular units. What I can tell you is that they will most likely be built in conformity with what is the central business district requirements. This was approved before I was mayor, the central business district downtown. It was approved, I believe, in October of 2016 as the transit village was approved. And what that calls for is first floor commercial, retail type setup, and second and third stories, or 2 additional stories of residential. Again, that was approved before I was mayor and before any of these individuals up here were on the council. That is what the downtown central business district permits as of right.
Okay. I think those are all my questions. I don't want to take any more
Okay,
time, but
thank
I look
you.
forward to your response.
Thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, Eli Abdi. Bring that up. I didn't plan to get up and talk, but after all this talk about traffic, these are just comments that I would like to make. We bought our first house in 1996, and we were right by the William Street, it was Barbara Street of William Street. I've been a resident for 32 years and used to live in Great Notch, so I was making a turn going to 46, and that was easy. When we bought our house, getting off the William Street, going to your left, I had to wait, and I had to wait maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So this is not a new concern. It has been always like that. And to me, if I have to wait 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it was okay. If there is a traffic, there is traffic. In the morning, I had to go to work, there's a traffic, I was waiting. So this is not, as the council said, it's not a new issue. If you have to build new roads, I don't know. But I don't understand why it's so much talk about the traffic on Main Street for something that it's been in the existence for so many years. So that was one point. The other point that Al made was that we lost 140 houses. Is that
We did, to the FEMA buyouts.
139.
Right,
139.
right. And my house was one. So the town needs to get taxes from somewhere. We sold our house to the state of New Jersey because we were in a flood area. So in order to get the taxes, and why do you think, or how do you think the taxes are stayed stable in our town? It was because we do all these developments. And the other point I wanted to make, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. I just wanted to say my PhD is also in public health. So it was nice to meet you. And that's it.
The floor is open. He's giving you a courtesy.
I appreciate that. I'm kind of building on the.
None of us will disagree with you with that.
The floor is open. Good evening.
Thank you, Council President Adam Zerbrek. Well, I mean, since everyone's giving a traffic anecdote, I figured I'd give mine, but just that I was late. I am going to admit I was late to pick up my son from preschool last week and had to get from my house at near Passaic Valley High School over to Fairfield, and I'm proud to say I got there in just under 10 minutes, and Chief Kroll, that was not speeding. So it is possible. I promise. So it is possible, in my experience, to make it through town reasonably quickly. But I just wanted to quickly give my perspective on the development topic, and then a question as well. I think I really appreciated the point, Mr. Mayor, that you made earlier about the developments that were approved prior to your administration, and the way that I take that, listening to this, and I happen to work in the architecture and urban planning field, and I think that there is a reason why each administration, no matter what the party through the years, has seen the need for development, is because, as you mentioned, obviously tax impact is important, and keeping a community growing is so important. This idea that we need to resist development in order to keep our town quaint and small, I think is a real myth, as we've seen it play out in communities across the country. That when a country doesn't grow and doesn't invest in itself, what happens is not that it stays small and quaint, but that it stagnates. And then we have problems keeping businesses, we have problems keeping residents, problems with public health and drug substance abuse. So I really appreciate that this administration, honestly, as previous ones have done, sees the need to invest in the community. And as far as this small town, keeping our small town feel, when there's a storm, I live near the Peckman, when there's a storm that's threatening flooding, Mayor, I see you walking around in a rain jacket to understand the impact, in real time. Councilman Kawadi, when there was a business owner in town, Mo and Jay's Pastry, that was winning the Food Network Championship, and you brought the whole community together to celebrate that. And now I see lines out the door at the bakery. That's building a community that invests in our people and our businesses. And Council President Scoba, I see you around town picking up garbage in your spare time because you have pride in this community. So the small town feel, I think, is here. And I don't doubt that it'll remain. But my question is, Mr. Mayor, you've implied that there were studies on the traffic impact for the new developments. I believe you've said before that there have been conversations with the school district about potential impact there. Can you elaborate on what those have found and whether or not there will be an actual traffic impact, what the impact would be on the schools, and what you've heard from those professionals and experts?
Mayor? Sure. So I think one of the first things that's important to note is what this site was prior to being approved for the current redevelopment that it's been approved for. And there's some photos that I'd just like to share real quick about what this site looked like prior to its current approval, where there's this development happening. Just open it first and then press share. And we'll get them up. But in the meantime, what I want to discuss is this. That site is 7.98 acres, an 8-acre site for all intents and purposes. It was entirely industrial. What does that mean? That means there could have been, as of right, an Amazon industrial facility open there. You want to talk about traffic? We could have had 118 wheelers per day coming down Main Street to access that site. But that's not a consideration by those who are concerned about traffic. It's vehicular traffic. As of right, that existed on that site. 18-wheeler after 18-wheeler could have come from Route 23, could have come from the other side of town, could have come from all the way in the east. 100 a day could have been making the way into and out of town every single day. So it's important to note what that site was prior to being redeveloped. As far as school impacts, this has been another major topic of concern voiced by many residents. And it's one that I don't, and here's some of the photos of what this site was before, and we'll get some others up. But one of the major topics is also, again, the impact of the schools. I want to provide some information about our schools. First, there was this myth, well, our schools are going to get gypped of taxes because of this redevelopment. That was something that I've heard numerous times. Everybody needs to know and be aware that the schools are very different in Little Falls than they are compared to some of the other municipalities where there has been pilot programs such as the one that we've implemented here. What I mean by that is this: Jersey City is a type 1 district. When they have a pilot, the schools do not get funding from these projects and essentially get gypped and don't get the portion of taxes that they used to get from these redeveloped sites. Very true. Little Falls is a type 2 district, as is almost every small city, small town, small borough within New Jersey. What that means is this: schools like Little Falls set their own budgets. The Little Falls School Board, and I'm going to make these numbers up, if last year for the 21-22 school year said we need $40 million to operate this year, what they did is they said, hey, Little Falls, generate $40 million worth of taxes for us allocate that among all of the homes in the municipality and give us $40 million and we'll pay our bills. If next year in the 22-23 school year, they say, hey, Little Falls, tell your tax collector we need $42 million this year to operate. What we do is we take the formula of every assessed value in home and we allocate and collect $42 million from every home in Little Falls, give it to the schools, and they pay all of their debts and bills. So the schools will never be gypped by a penny because of this development. So that is certainly a major misconception. Now, something else I'd like to address is the impact on schools regarding the number of students. I've heard this. I have kids of my own. I have one going into second grade this year and another starting kindergarten next year. So the schools are a concern to me as much as anybody as they can be, especially with my kids having a lot of years ahead of them, where most of these developments will be completed as my kids are making their way through the schools. And there's some information that I'd like to provide about the number of schools and the number of children. So although there's only been 40 that have been approved by my administration, 40 new units approved and now occupied by my administration and that are now constructed, there have certainly been more that have been constructed, or I should say approved prior to and now constructed. Of the 34 units on 44 Main, the 50 at the Abbey, the 24 at Autumn Point, and there's 24 additional homes at the top of Highview, but we're not going to consider those because those are single family homes, very different than anything that's been approved. Of the 108 units that have been constructed and are now occupied, there's 2 children in our schools. 2 children in our schools. Now, one might say, well, that's 2 additional children. What happens when there's all of these units? If we extrapolate that based on the current numbers, and I don't believe this will be the case, I believe there may be a handful more, that would only be 6 additional kids from this entire redevelopment. Now, do I believe there will be a few more than 6? I absolutely do, without question. But if you consider the number of classrooms that we actually have in our schools, we have 9 grades, kindergarten through 8. We have 4 to even 5 sections of almost every single grade. That's 45 different classrooms that we have in our kindergarten through 8th grade programs here in Little Falls. If we had 45 kids to our schools as a result of everything, which again, I believe may even be high, class sizes would increase, again, based upon statistics, by 1. Every 45 kids added to our schools is a class size increase of 1. Now, what's also important to note is the current ratios that we have of teachers to students in each of our schools. And the current ratios are as follows. And bear with me. In our current schools, school 3 has, and I'm sorry, there are actually 52 total classrooms currently being used. That was just averages of assuming 5 per the 9 grades. There's actually 52 classrooms in our schools currently. And as I look for the ratios here, I believe they are somewhere in the range of 8-to-1 and 9-to-1 in all 3 of our schools. I'm sorry, school 2 is 13-to-1, school 3 is 8-to-1, and school 1 is 8-to-1. That's the ratio that we have right now of teachers to students, including aides and rooms. So to say that our classrooms are overcrowded right now is certainly not something that can be affirmed by, again, this development.
Councilman Quaddi, anything to add?
Sure. So when we went door to door when I was running 4 years ago, the number one concern among people was, how are we going to stabilize taxes? What can we do about taxes? The new development is going to bring in an estimated $1.3 million additional every year to the township. That's how you stabilize taxes. For me personally, I don't know if you're looking at the photo that I'm looking at. I wouldn't allow Little Falls taxpayers to pay $1.3 million a year to keep that in Little Falls.
Can you just cycle through a couple of the photos there, Mr. Cuccia, as we have them up there?
I also wouldn't allow them to pay $1.3 million to keep the other photos not in Little Falls. right? We know what that area looks like, but anybody
Excuse me,
who
Councilman
says,
Cardy, for the
Yeah.
record, what photos, are this the photos at the,
the mayor asked for these to be
Rainbow
showed,
Caterers?
oh, yes,
So
what
so
was,
for the record?
Sure,
What
these are a
was-
couple of photos of what was in and has now been demolished within the Singac redevelopment zone.
right.
And this is just a select five. I believe I have almost 100 total photos
Right.
of what this site looked like. I didn't want to filter through 100 photos this evening here, but I certainly can share about 100 photos with people if they would like of what this site looked like prior to this redevelopment.
Now, mind you, we as a council are not redeveloping that area, right? A developer comes to us and proposes a project, and we basically get an opportunity to say yes or no. The project that's there fits the Little Falls community far better than anything you'll see in any of those photos. And it comes at a $1.3 million benefit to the taxpayers. That, to me, there are always tough decisions to be made when you sit on a council. There are decisions that require intelligence and maturity and the wherewithal to say, maybe that's not the way I would have designed it. Maybe that's not the perfect situation, but it's better than that aesthetically, community-wise, and to the tune of $1.3 million. That's my comment.
Councilman Vanchery?
I was just going to add, Mayor, you want to touch on too, as we talk about the schools, but lost in all this too was there was 139 homes that were bought out, and most of them, I'm guessing, were 3 to 4 bedrooms. And impact.
That's a great point. There were 139 homes affected by the FEMA buyouts in Little Falls. Those were not one-bedroom homes. Many of the units that we've seen approved, and many that were just previously asked about, are one-bedroom units. Those will not bring children to the schools. And if they do, there's a concern that needs to be investigated. So to say that, there's a lot more development in the schools concerned, to your point, Mr. Zerberg, is that I do not believe that will there be some impact to the school? I can't say there will be 0 children added to the schools. Absolutely not. So will there be some impact? Yes. I believe that impact to the schools will be nominal in such a way that it does not impact any of the current children's educations here in Little Falls. In fact, and I know Little Falls schools have been, to call them a glowing representation of what any town could possibly ask for is probably an understatement. The schools will almost be performing even better if we add a small number of students to them in this sense, because if they continue to do as well as they have, which I have no doubt that they will, the cost per pupil, because they will not incur additional costs to add a small number of children, the cost to educate per pupil will actually go down in averages, making Little Falls look as even though it has even better schools than it currently does, which is almost hard to believe. And final point to this site that you were addressing. One of the concerns we've heard a lot of from earlier today, including from Ms. Schultz, was concerns of flooding, adding impervious coverage to areas. This redevelopment site actually has a substantial reduction in impervious coverage because it was paved or it was roofs from almost corner to corner to corner to corner prior to this redevelopment. We are now adding back a ton of grass, a ton of trees, a ton of landscape that did not exist there when it was that Singac redeveloped, before the Singac redevelopment project was approved.
Mayor, it also adds a floodwater retention system underneath.
Substantial floodwater retention. So a lot less water will actually be traveling to the waterways than did prior to the site being approved.
Thank you all for your responses.
Thank you for joining us this evening. The floor is open. Mr. Fernandez, before you speak, Ms. Schultz, I see that your hand is up, but we want to ask those residents that haven't spoken at all to speak, and then we'll circle back to you, okay?
That's fine. That's what I would expect.
Okay. The floor is yours, sir.
Luis Fernandez. I, like always, have to disagree with you in most of the issues. One issue is the traffic. Traffic, there is no doubt that when so many people are complaining about traffic, I don't understand why you're trying to justify that there is no traffic. I mean, so many people cannot be blind. There is an increase in traffic. I see it myself. And I've been a resident of Little Falls for quite a few years. Especially, Mr. Kawali, you mentioned that you rather, and you pointed out at the picture, that you rather see $1.3 million looking like that than the other picture. That you, the township, that is good for the township to get $1.3 million in tax revenue. Am I correct?
Then to have
Than
that.
to
Yeah,
have something,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I agree with you. I'd rather have $1.3 million than collect $400,000 that was collected before. However, and you and I went back and forth quite a few times, when that $1.3 million is spread equally among the residents, and when I mean equally, is that the contractor doesn't get any pilot program breaks. I don't care what he sells the price of his 287 apartments for. I care that he pays his share fair value. Why should I, that has a house, estimated value, tax value at $280,000, pay more in taxes than a brand new condominium, market value $600,000, and he's only going to be paying half of what the $8,000 that I paid?
Sure, so I can answer that. for you.
Hold on.
Before you jump around though, I just want to address the
Mr. Fernandez,
concerns
if
that
we,
you've raised.
we'll just answer this question and you can continue,
Okay.
okay? Go ahead, Mayor.
So first, regarding the traffic, I agree with you. There's more vehicles in Little Falls than ever before. I don't disagree.
Okay.
I've said that. What I've said is, it's not due to, until a week ago, the 28 additional units that have been built and constructed here in Little Falls. What what you said is, there's more traffic in Little Falls.
Traffic.
What I said is, I agree with that. But my point is, it's not because of projects that have been approved in Little Falls. So next issue, you're again addressing the pilot. Here is that fine line that we've discussed in the past. Without a pilot, the project does not happen. So here were your options. This is what myself and this council were essentially presented with. A, the site can remain as is because it is economically and financially impossible to generate $1 in revenue if you do not provide us with a pilot. It's option one, the site remains as is. Option two, the Township of Little Falls can generate $1.3 million more per year with the project as it was approved. Now, granted, the developer initially wanted almost double the number of units within that redevelopment site. It was not, hey, we need 102 townhomes and 185 apartments, and here's our numbers, and here's what we need, and it's done. That number was whittled down from about double that in the early stages to a number where, when we reviewed all of the finances, made it profitable to a developer, otherwise it does not happen, but also generated an additional $1.3 million. So the question that I have for you is, if you were in my or this council's shoes, the question is, does it remain what you saw on that screen plus 95 additional pictures like it, where trucks and trailers would be permitted as of right to drive in and out of there, generating in total about $300,000 a year in taxes? Or does it become the SINGAC redevelopment site that it is and generate closer to $1.6 million per year? Those are the two options. I agree with you. If the pilot was not necessary to make this happen, it probably would not have been offered. Although frankly, the municipality, when you crunch numbers, makes out substantially better with a pilot than it does without. You as a resident, me as a resident, every single taxpayer in this town makes out better with a pilot than without. But if it was not necessary whatsoever, frankly, a pilot probably would have never been offered. You want to know why? Because it has been probably the most controversial thing that I and this council have had to approve in this town. So I again circle back to one of those two options. It stays as is, or it turns into this with the pilot. And that was the question that we were left to answer. And for the benefit of every resident here in Little Falls, we went with option two.
Okay, I can see your point of view. I don't agree, but I can see it.
That's fine,
Okay.
absolutely.
And the point, let's say once the complex is fully built and everybody moved in, he's gonna accommodate, let's say, 100 people, 600 people, 600 people. Yeah, just to be on the safe side.
Sure.
Why should those 600 people pay half of the taxes than the rest of Little Falls, 13,000 people pay?
So
That is my, hold on.
those people won't be, so you have to break it down into two separate sections here. One is the 185 apartments. Those individuals will be paying their rent to the landlord.
Correct.
We have entered into a deal. So, and again, I just want you to understand the pilot. We've entered into a contract essentially with the landlord or property owner of the 185 units, where the better he does, the better we do, because we receive in the first year 10% of his gross revenues. 10% of his gross revenues. The 1.3 number is an estimate. I am actually believing it could be higher, especially with the way rents have gone skyrocketing, especially in this particular section of New Jersey. So we may do even better. So we're in a business deal where for the first handful of years, we get 10% of the gross revenues that he generates. It goes to 11 and 12, and on a progressive scale, over time, we continue to generate even more from that project. The townhomes are an entirely separate division of what that redevelopment is. And I would agree with you. There is a part of it that says, you know what, it's slightly unfair. They get to pay 75% of their assessed value for their homes compared to what I pay. I would agree with you. But for this, because these individuals purchase these properties and get a reduction in the total amount of taxes that they pay, it has increased the value of these properties that they're purchasing.
Yeah, but the only one making money is the contractor.
Wrong,
No, he's not.
wrong. And I say that because the contractor does make money as a result of that. That's how this project became possible. Back to my original statement, this wasn't possible without it. So because they pay an increased value because of the reduction that they receive, that they may not have paid that amount at the time that they purchased it had they been paying 100%. Now, over time, in over a handful of years, it does go up to 100%.
Over 30 years.
Correct, but again, it goes up to 85 and 95% rather quickly.
Over 30 years.
No,
All right.
but it doesn't take 30 years to move. You do understand that, right?
No, but over 30 years, they'll be paying 100% of the full
So,
value.
Right,
you
but
upset-
it goes up incrementally. Just making sure you're aware.
Are you
That's
upset
all.
with the resident who gets to pay less in taxes than you? Is that what you're upset about?
No, I'm
For the same
upset.
assessed value?
I'm upset whether in a democratic community, some people pay more taxes and they have a higher price home value-wise than some other people.
Not entirely true also.
Oh, here we go.
Well, I'll tell you why. You just said what your home is,
My
you
tax
just
bill.
indicated what your home is assessed for, correct?
Yeah,
You have it listed and sold currently. You're not getting the assessed value on your home, are you? And again, we don't need to get into the numbers. My
You
point is
didn't
this.
sell it for what it's assessed
You are
for.
receiving and selling it for substantially more than it's assessed for. So the point is this. So what? The answer to so what is this? And I'm going to use, again, the rule of averages in town. If your home is assessed for $310,000 in Little Falls, you're paying about $10,000 in taxes.
Correct.
Okay. But your home is assessed for under, you just indicated $310,000, which means you're paying less than $10,000 a year in taxes on averages.
Mhm.
Those individuals just paid $600,000+ for a home. They're paying about $20,000 in taxes with a slight reduction. But the point is this, you've sold your home for almost double what you've indicated your assessed value is. So the point is you pay $10,000 for a home that is being sold for exactly what they just purchased their home for, paying $15,000.
You're comparing oranges and apples. We all know.
I'm not.
You come from a real estate family. I was a realtor for many years.
Sure.
We both know that that is only assessed value for tax reasons only.
Absolutely. But you've just indicated your home is worth double what it's assessed for,
The market is.
but what you're paying, the same market that they live in. And again, we can agree to disagree on this topic. And I don't disagree with you that, again, if the pilot was not necessary, it would not have happened.
Okay.
Can I
Right, the
just
floor,
simplify what he said
Councilman
really
Claudio.
quickly for you? What he's saying is that those homes are assessed for what they're selling for.
Who is saying that?
The mayor
I
is
am.
saying that those new homes are assessed for what they're selling for. Whereas your home was assessed at half of what it's selling
I'm
for.
not sure about that,
Oh,
but
okay.
you might, yeah.
Right. And
It's a different.
This is not from the
Hold on a
seats.
second.
Hold on a second. Mr. We don't shout and we don't take from, okay? Right? We run a good, clean meeting here. We have, and we respect the
The,
speakers. Hold on, one more thing.
you have-
If you need to have conversations, please take it outside. Go ahead.
The other thing that I agree with, I think her name was Mr. Schultz, was that about the development to be built right across from the fire station on Patterson Avenue. I think you mentioned it was 80-something units
In total, yes.
altogether. Well, why should they have a pilot as well?
Why? Because the project can happen without it.
But here we
Back to
go.
my original point.
Pilot.
No,
These
there's-
ones that
there's no
look at it-
pilot.
There's been one
they
pilot.
don't have one.
There's been one pilot in town, the Singac redevelopment project. There is no pilot on Patterson Ave.
Yes,
and-
there is.
No, there's not.
For parking, they are 30-something.
No, 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 no,
That's
no,
not
no.
a pilot.
Hold on. A pilot is a payment
Pilot.
in lieu of taxes. A pilot
Same thing.
is a developer paying more to the municipality. So you have literally just taken a pilot and turned it on its
Okay, on
head.
these taxes,
because-
because parking, but they are getting,
Correct.
the township is getting
More money on a pilot.
granted, but the ones that are suffering are the ones, and you mentioned something about traffic. I do have a problem coming to 44 Main for my therapy. I can barely find a parking on certain days. And I can only imagine what that is gonna be once those 80-something apartments are built.
I agree with you. And good news, the township has just acquired and paid for and closed on the PNC parking lot. So it is now municipal public parking that the residents of Little Falls can utilize. It is no longer a private lot. So you can certainly feel free to park there in the future. We're in the process of
have-
redeveloping
I
that
have
along with the
better
3
news.
homes.
If everything goes well, I'll be out of here.
Well, good luck.
But anyway, it is concerning. One of the things that I bought into Little Falls many years ago, it was because it was a tiny community, he had the sense of community, and now he's not.
Mr. Fernandez, I'm going to turn your attention to the photo on the wall back there.
Mhm.
That brown, different colored brown frame.
Right.
That's a photo of Little Falls. It hasn't looked like that for a long time,
I
prior to me taking this office. The point is this: townships must, and every township will, continue to evolve and change. I don't disagree that there have been changes in Little Falls, even since I've been elected. But stagnation, and wait, I need to finish with this sentence.
Okay.
If there is not one new program in town to generate additional revenue, if there's not one new development in Little Falls to generate additional taxes, every dollar of additional taxes that the municipality needs year after year after year to continue to operate will 100% be assessed to the residents who have and continue to live within town. Meaning, your taxes would go up substantially more than they have, which I know is hard to believe, substantially more than they have if every town with if Little Falls and every town within Passaic County didn't continue to evolve.
All right, you also, and one of the reasons, and I skipped this, I don't know why. One of the reasons, somebody mentioned that 139 homes, I think it was you, were bought by FEMA or,
Correct.
that was a while ago. And you eliminated, I think you brought that point, you would have eliminated some of the traffic. Am I-
Well, what I said was, if our traffic infrastructure was so fragile.
Right.
That the few developments that have come online are now causing a great deal of traffic, then that traffic would have existed 10 years ago. It would have waned when those homes went away, and it would have come back
And-
now.
I understand what you're
It would
saying.
be on its way back now.
I-
Well, you're quoting what I said. I just want to make sure you get it correct.
But my point is, if it was 139 homes were bought out by FEMA,
Mhm.
why do we keep nothing personally and nothing against the department.
Right.
Why do we keep hiring more cops?
We have
if-
not.
If the, hold on a second, just, if the population goes down.
We haven't hired more cops. We've hired new cops
new
as
cops-
old cops leave. But the total, I mean, that's like saying, why do we ever hire new
Yeah.
teachers?
I
Because eventually they get old and phase out. So we
remember
need new
at one
teachers.
point we had.
Why do we hire new cops?
We have right now.
Because we'd be at 0 cops if we'd never hired a new one. 0.
And not that I'm against, I believe in law and order. But if the population goes down, so I will imagine every department will go down a little bit because the services are less needed.
No, but the point is this, we're gonna have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new residents and no new additional employees to continue providing the exact same services. So new revenues coming in without additional costs in generating and hiring additional employees. So you raise a great point. So the number, when I was elected mayor, was about 30 police officers in Little Falls. And depending on the day of the week or the month of the year, we've been between 29 and 30 police officers the entire time that I've been mayor. I've certainly hired maybe 10, but 10 have also retired.
Also, one thing that this will
Mr.
be the last
Fernandez?
question.
Is there one more question? Because we have
The
other
last
speakers. Okay.
You indicated, well, no, you indicated, I'm sorry. I brought this question into consideration a while ago. Once they start, and hopefully will start soon, that tunnel that from the Peckman River that should alleviate the flood in the Jackson Park area.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah. Well, I have asked you this before. Will flood insurance be eliminated completely from Jackson Park? The homeowners won't have to, because one of the things, even right now, as the market is booming and whatever, and like you say, I get more money from my house now that, but I still don't get the same amount of money that if the house was located someplace else. And the reason why is because in a flood area. My question is,
Sure.
once that tunnel is complete, will flood insurance won't be required in the flood area park? So the residents can, if they wish, whoever wish to stand, they're more than welcome. But if they wish, will they be able to sell their homes for the same price than if it was the house was located in a non-flood area?
So I can't answer this with 100% certainty, but because, and this is a FEMA issue, right? This is handled by the federal government who puts these maps and these flood hazard areas on their maps. But what I can tell you is that with a very high degree of certainty, once this flood tunnel is installed, that the hazard map for flooding in that area will either be greatly reduced or completely eliminated. I don't know that the amount of flood insurance that is paid will be 0. But again, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I do believe it will be reduced.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
thank you.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mike Murphy. There's a lot said tonight. I just want to ask a couple questions and clarify a few things, if that's okay. Mr. Mayor, you gave a statistic before on some 40 units. I just want to clarify. You also said on Main Street, the Sing Equity Development, there was 287 approved by your administration.
That's correct.
There were 80 on Patterson Avenue,
Correct.
50 at the Falls,
Correct.
and 60 at 453 Main Street.
Correct.
So I think what you were using, that figure you were using, because that's 477 units. I think that figure of 40 that you're using is occupied, currently occupied.
No, the number of 40 that I'm using is the total number of units that have been approved since I've been elected mayor and are now occupied. And that was in relation to the total amount of traffic here in Little Falls. People saying that the developments that have been approved by myself and this administration have increased traffic in Little Falls. And my point is that 40 units have not increased traffic to any noticeable degree here in Little Falls.
Correct. But I just want to clarify, 477 units were approved by your administration.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, with that figure, were any studies ever done with the schools on how many students this may bring in?
Yes, substantial studies were done, especially with the Sing Equity Development study. There was actually ample testimony provided at the planning boards.
Okay, and how many students they estimate?
I don't recall off the top of my head. That was probably 5 years, it's almost 4 years ago that happened.
Can I or any resident be able to see that report? Where
Of course.
can we pull it from? We have to operate. How do we?
Yeah, it'd be an operable document that can certainly be found.
It's not in the public for anybody to see or anything?
I mean, not here. The best way and safest way to do it would be to open that.
Okay. So that study was done 5 years ago, clearly. What about the other units? Because obviously that's 300, I'll use rough numbers, 300 units at that Sing Equity Development. What about the 80 on Patterson Ave or the 50 or the 60? What about those units? Nothing was done on those?
No, not with the schools, but again, we have statistics to guide us in that. And the 55+ community, the guarantee is that there will be 0 children.
Okay. Now, you brought up a good point. I do want to applaud this administration on that one thing. And I'm the Republican chairman, and I think people kind of have that misconception in town that we're against development. Everyone understands that you have to develop. And we always talk about smart development. What is smart development? 55+ where there's not a burden on our schools. And so why I'm bringing the schools up, and I think this is a point that may be getting overlooked, while you keep talking about how there's 1 and 2 bedroom units, I think the equation that you're not finding is that in my office alone, I have 6, 7 moms and dads who are single parents who own single bedroom and double bedroom apartments who have kids and children in that district. So while you can make the argument all day long that you don't think that they equate or add to the school system, they 100% do. So I think what this administration needs to do is really look at that study and really look at where our schools are at. You also used a figure of an 8-to-1 ratio. I think that figure is also incorrect. I think you need to use the classroom average, not teacher to student ratio. I don't know. I'm on the Board of Education. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Board of Education. I'm not speaking for the Board of Education. I'm speaking as a resident that's informed about their class sizes. I don't know of really any classrooms that are 8 students to 1 teacher.
That's correct. I said that was the ratio of teachers and aides to students.
Okay, what is the ratio I just asked?
I don't know. I don't have that
Okay, so I
information
think
here.
that's another ratio we have to consider, because even though you're talking about a small number of students, a couple students to that ratio could be substantial.
Again, with 54 current or 54 current classrooms, it would take 54 additional kids for that ratio to go up by 1.
Right, but out of 477 units, that number could be a lot higher. And you brought up a good point about how good our schools are doing. And obviously, your family's in real estate. I would say that, from my understanding, and obviously you would know this just as well, parents tend to move to towns where schools are flourishing. Would you agree with that?
No doubt about it.
So I think that's something else we have to look at. My second question is on the COVID relief money the town received. What was the total amount received? And what was that money allocated for? And how much of that have we used?
At this point, I don't recall. I know there were several rounds of funding that have been provided. Mr. Kuchar, do you recall off the top of your head the amount of COVID relief funds that were provided?
The CARES money that we received from State County was just north of $800,000. That was for the actual activity of changing our engineering controls and taking care of first responders and all of that.
I believe.
ARPA money,
Yep.
the ARPA money we got was $1.3 million, and that went to revenue loss.
Revenue loss.
Correct. So it made us whole on the revenue that we didn't generate, that we had always estimated and assumed that the township would receive. Across the state of New Jersey, obviously, budgets are prepared every single year. And a municipality can only estimate revenues in a particular area that were as much as were generated in the prior year. And that's oftentimes what we do in preparing our budgets. For example, we can assume that the court will generate, I'm going to make this number up, $250,000 per year for the municipality. Well, in light of COVID, and again, that's one of many examples where we generate revenue. We may have only received about $125,000 that year. So that ARPA money that we received went to offset that lost revenue from the courts, from our building department, which we saw a major hit in, from all of those various things. And also, one of the major things that we actually received a huge benefit on, I believe, from the COVID relief funds from the county, is we were able to purchase a new CAD system for our police department to the tune of $450,000, $500,000, I believe, which was an expense that, is that correct?
I think it was a little less. I think it was around $300,000.
Around $300,000, which was an expense that the township was basically going to be forced to incur on its own, whether or not we receive these COVID relief funds, because our CAD, which is the computer automated dispatch system that our first responders use, it was going to have to be repaired or upgraded, I should say. So we were able to allocate $300,000 of those COVID relief funds towards purchasing the new computer automated dispatch system that we now are using to operate, which came at a substantial savings to us. So we really lucked out with that one.
Okay, thank you. And last thing real quick, I know we were talking about traffic. I'm sure everyone's tired of talking about traffic. I think one of the points that we may be missing on that as well, that 477 units approved. Again, I think that's the figure you have to work at. And when I talk to residents as I'm out and, you know, at events, I think everyone sees the amount of traffic now and gets concerned with that number of units approved in that period of time, what it may do to Main Street, what it may do to side streets. And so I think that's a concern we're hearing a lot of. And I don't want to harp on traffic because I know that was a lot that was brought up.
Sure.
But I think that's a lot of what people are getting at is they're concerned. And those 477 units, some of those are 3-bedroom, some of them are 2. Could be 2, 3 cars with that. So I did just want to make that point.
Sure. So luckily for us, the Route 46 and Route 3 project will be concluding probably around the same time that many of these developments are becoming occupied. Again, that number of vehicles, if you stand here on Main Street and count the number, and again, we're using Main Street as the barometer for all traffic in Little Falls, right? But there's many of us when coming to or from our homes that might not necessarily use Main Street to get there. In fact, many residents in town don't use Main Street and take a lot of the back roads to get to their
Put
homes.
it every chance I have.
Right. Well, the point being this, to say that everybody is assuming that traffic's going to be worse. Now, will more Little Falls residents' vehicles be added to our roadways with these developments? Sure. But will that come at around the same time that hundreds and hundreds of vehicles are removed from the Little Falls roadways because the transients who are coming and using Main Street as the cut through to get back to 46 are no longer using that because the DOT has, fingers crossed, designed the most incredible, flyover at the Route 3 and 46 exchange moving forward, and everybody stays on Route 46 because it is moving 55 miles per hour the entire time. That's the plan. That's the hopes. But to use the current traffic as a barometer for how bad it is now, sure, again, having nothing to do with recent development, to say that, oh, it's going to get so much worse, that's an assumption. And until anybody sees that actually happen, it's nothing more than an assumption.
I agree with you 100%. Just to that point, 900 cars does seem like a lot, even with that shutting down. So, but I appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate you doing these type of meetings. I think we should have more of these forums. I think it's good if we had more of these, maybe you have more people coming and asking questions. So I want to thank you for having this.
Luckily, what?
Well, unfortunately, we don't see people, but now that the political season, so Mr. Fernandez, now that the political season is heating up, now we see 15 people. Let's put the cards on the table, right? We don't see nobody all year. No,
Well,
let me speak, Mr. Murphy, let me speak. We give you time.
Sure.
Right?
I
Okay, thank you,
respect
sir.
that 1000%.
So, thank you. So we don't, as we only see Mr. Fernandez, with all due respect, but we don't see nobody else. So
Sure.
we understand it's political season time. We understand there's 2 parties here and they're battling back and forth, and you're welcome to do that.
I would agree with
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Luckily, August 8th,
Council-
we'll have another meeting just like this, the first meeting in August. It's already been announced that there will be a similar the same style meeting as there is here. So that is something, and again, this is something in this type of meeting, when I proposed this to the council, they were incredibly receptive when this was proposed, because in past years prior to me being elected mayor, in the summer months, there was always 1 meeting per month by the council on the regular schedule. So we're still going to have, and again, since I've been elected, we've continued to have 2 every single month. But for these months of July and August, when business, frankly, in town and a lot of the approvals, the budget season is over and we're not towards the end, the latter portion of the year where things start picking up again. I think this gives us the best of both worlds. We're able to continue having one real regular meeting per month where business is handled, and a second meeting per month where we're able to engage in dialogue with residents, to express concerns, to address issues. Again, if traffic or turning is an issue, I want to meet people there to stand where they say the problem exists, see it with my own eyes, and address it if it exists and something can be done. So again, I agree with you. This is a very good form of a meeting, something that's never really happened here in town.
Would you like to respond to one thing? That's okay. So in regard to the political issue, yes, obviously there are political issues. I would agree with that. But I think one of the things that people are hesitant on doing is coming to these chambers because they may be intimidated to come here. And so I speak with residents all through town at the July 4th fair, whatever the case may be. These are concerns we're hearing. So whether I'm the vehicle that's being brought to you guys to say the concerns, or whether it's somebody else saying it, if there's a resolution or it gets brought to light, you call it whatever you would like. I think as long as the issue comes to light, I think that's what the true matter is.
That's a great point. And as you heard, every single resident in town received a letter from me with their tax bill. On the top of that bill is my cell phone, the only cell phone that I own. I don't have a town phone. I don't have a bat phone. I have one cell phone, my private cell phone. My cell phone number is on the top of that letter. My cell phone number is in every single email that goes out. My cell phone number is everywhere. My email address is everywhere. You're right. Standing here at a podium addressing the council on a dais, it can be intimidating. And I've said to everyone, send me an email, call me, Facebook me. I don't care how you reach out to me. If you have a question or a concern. Last night, there was loud noise coming from a festival in town that was being hosted. I had a dozen Facebook messages. I welcome it. I don't love it at 9:30 on a Sunday evening, but I welcome it.
Three times as well. Yeah.
And we
was
addressed it.
loud.
I'm sure your backyard heard it.
Yes, we heard it.
So the point being, if people want to contact me, or even this council, because their numbers are available too.
Sure.
You can do it 365 days a year. I bring my cell phone, even on the couple of days a year I go on vacation. You can reach me any day, anytime on my cell phone, by email, if you don't want to stand here at this podium.
Thank you. I appreciate
Councilman Vanchery, anything that?
No, I was just gonna say the same thing. I mean, sometimes people are intimidated to come here, but we're accessible at all times. I mean, we do get emails, we get text messages, we get phone calls, we get Facebook messages. If you can't come here, reach out to us. Sometimes, Mr. Fernandez, we even had this conversation with you where it was like you came and waited 2 weeks to tell us something when you could have picked up the phone easily or sent us an email. We're always accessible and you shouldn't feel intimidated here. Sometimes it is hard for people to stand up, but the great thing that we offer that nobody else offers too is we have people in this room right now, but we also have people on this screen as well that are able to sit in their kitchen or dining room, on the couch, watching a game or whatever, but they're able to listen and participate. Can't say that about a lot of towns that do this. And yes, to Council President Scoba's point, we'll have 10 or 12 people online, but Mr. Fernandez is the only person in this room. And, whether he agrees with us or not, it doesn't matter. We respect his opinion,
Of course.
just like he respects ours. So it's like, if anybody has comments or concerns, always come here because we're the first ones to tell you that we're not perfect and we'll do our best to look into something. There's times where people say, look, there's issues on our road. We look into speed humps. We look into a stop sign. We do those things. So it's, we're as open as possible to any suggestions. That's why I don't think that if you come here, oh, you're going to get shut down. It does not happen. We're here to listen. We're up here to help the township. That's who we serve. And if we can help any way, shape, or form, we are going to do it.
Councilman Quadri?
Yes, I'd just like to say, obviously, for anybody that feels intimidated by standing up in front of a room full of people, I completely understand that. This is not something that most people are accustomed to, but we are out in the community constantly. There's a farmer's market on Sunday mornings that was started by this administration that at least 2 of our council people, probably 3 or 4 at any given moment from 9 to 2 every Sunday are there. There are the concerts in the park that we try to attend as much as possible. There's 5 movie nights coming up in August. There's Water Fun Fest. There's the Memorial Day Parade. There's the Memorial Day Kickoff Parade, event, summer kickoff event. There are library events that we attend. There are so many events that we have put ourselves out there, and all of our phone numbers are on the website. I get as many concerns from residents through my phone as I do being out in the public in person, as actually infinitely more than we get from people who come to the meeting. So there is no notion of inaccessibility to the members of the people that are up here. We find ways to be out in the community that didn't exist before we were in office.
Awesome. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Peggy O'Leary. I do not have a question about traffic. I do not have a question about development. I don't have a question at all. Actually, a comment that I've been wanting to say for a long time. I would like to thank the mayor and the town council for recognizing diverse groups that are meaningful to many of us who live here. It's important that all Little Falls residents be made to feel at home in their hometown. Thank you for honoring and acknowledging veterans, Autism Awareness, Italian American Unico, Women's History Month, Gay Pride, Boy Scout leaders, Girl Power Robotics, I love that one, Down Syndrome Awareness, even our town baker, Jaleesa of Mo and Jay's Bakery. Thank you for making Little Falls an inclusive town. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
I just want to clarify.
Excuse me, name, sir?
He said,
I'm sorry, did you say it?
Sam Shue.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. Good evening.
I just want to clarify a few things that I heard, during this meeting. Number one, do you have a Board of Health?
I'm sorry, can
Do you
you?
have a Board of Health?
We do not have our own local Board of Health.
You
We
don't-
rely
you don't
upon
have
the,
a Board of Health officer, one of the committeemen?
no.
Oh, okay. We used to have one, and they had a meeting once a month before the Township Committee, that he would report what came from the health officer.
Sure. So Mayor, you bring up an interesting point. I believe you were mayor 48 years ago now, 49 years ago here in Little Falls? You were mayor 49 years ago here in Little Falls?
50.
50 years ago. I was
Call it 50.
close. Pretty good. 50 years ago here in Little Falls. The form of government in Little Falls has changed substantially about 10 years ago here in Little Falls. And as a result of that, and I know there were a lot of committee members who oversaw various committees and organizations and groups here in town. That form of government has been, again, having nothing to do with any of us up here, you know, I'm sure you were familiar with the process as it occurred. It's been completely revamped. So the form of government that we have is not the same as it was. So or I should say, council members no longer sit on committees. The only committees that the township has are advisory. We call them ad hoc committees. So it's a very different form of government than existed back then.
But the government was good back then also.
I don't disagree. It was outstanding when you were mayor.
So the thing, I'm not criticizing. You take everything as criticism.
No, there was no criticism. I'm just explaining why the process is a little different.
It's a recommendation that you have a health officer that would get the information from the county and we used to have a meeting before the township committee met. And that would get the information out. That's what you're there for, is to give information to the.
Sure. So we do have a health officer. We contract with the Clifton Health Department, who provides health services to the township of Little Falls.
Right, you should give it to your health officer. The health officer is the one that should be checking. You want to do it this way?
He is our health officer. There is no local Little Falls health
I
officer.
know that health officer appointed one of the committee or committee men.
I see, as like a liaison to the health department.
He can make a report. Okay. Secondly, I'm not against the apartments. The thing is, I'm against the density. The apartments look like a factory when you walk down the street. You're parked right on the curb. You're going to have to make the sidewalks one way, because as soon as they step out, somebody's going to hit them.
So, Mr. Schumer, you bring up a very interesting point with that also. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, as you pull out of the municipal building tonight, check out the corner of Main and Union. And I say that because the mill, if you look at where the sidewalk is and where the building is of the mill, there's less than 4 feet of difference. Now, I raise that point to say this. I agree with you. Those buildings are close to the curb. I don't disagree. That's been a constant comment that I've heard, and I've never disagreed with anyone who said they're close. I agree they're close. The mill is even closer, but I say that to say this. Right now, nobody looks at the mill and says, wow, the mill is so close to the street. There's so many, the parking garage at the mill, this corner building here at the mill is so close to the street. Why? Because it's become part of your landscape of Little Falls over the years. Now, the reason it is as close to the street as it is gets to your comment just a second ago, the density. In order to make this project even possible, the certain density that they got in this project is what was needed. And like I said, they would have loved to have double the density, but that's where the negotiation came in.
Why was it needed? What was the cost of acquisition for the land?
$24.5 million.
All right, you couldn't, in other words, you couldn't take one section of the straight across and had a 20-foot setback. It had to be that much units.
Unfortunately, it did. Yes. And I don't disagree with you. Unfortunately, yes, it did require that close of a setback to get the density to the rear of the lot there in order to make the project even possible.
Why couldn't you follow, when you're building and you're doing things, you have to create also quality of life for the residents.
Sure.
Okay, so you have to balance. So when you do an improvement, I don't care what the person comes in, you have a planning board. The planning board tells the builder how many units. You have that. I've expressed I didn't see that done, but the one with the bank that's been approved, I went up there to listen. I was shocked. No matter what the residents said, they said it's approved. There's no such thing as approved. You're before the planning board. You're supposed to tell them what to do. I asked the traffic study, didn't do a traffic study. It's on record. I said, did you talk to the police? They didn't talk to the police, yet it was passed. I asked them about the residents came and was asking about the underground parking, would it be flooded? They said, that's up to the builder. It's not up to the builder. It's up to the town to solve those problems before they build.
Sure. So,
And
Mr.
that's on
Schumer,
record.
so, Mr. Schumer, if I may, you addressed the quality of life,
Right.
and you're talking about the Singac redevelopment project. I'm glad you brought that up. Residents in that neighborhood, most, if not all of them, would agree that there were football-sized rats running around that entire 8-acre site.
Then
For-
get the health officer there.
But again, you're addressing, and again, that's what existed. The point being this, is that quality of life in that area overall, I believe will be better with this development there than not. And we can agree to disagree on that issue.
Density.
As far as
I'm talking about.
the density, again, was necessary to make the project possible on the, why? Because without the density, because here's why. That land was assessed at $8 million,
Right.
roughly. The developer in purchasing that property
Yeah.
paid $24.5 million. And this goes back to the argument, well, then don't develop the project.
No.
Right? That's, again, and that's the balance that I and this council had to consider in that project. Do we not allow it? And do we leave it as is, as an industrial site in the middle of downtown Little Falls? Or do we develop it into what it is? And the density, had we cut that by 20 units, 30 units, 50 units, 100 units, the developer would have said, I cannot financially afford to do this project. And that was the line we were on in cutting this to the 287 total units. We were teetering on the line of if we cut an extra 5 units or 10 units from that project, the project was not financially feasible. And again, that's the balance. I don't disagree it's close to the street. I don't disagree on a lot of the things that you've said, but the balance and the question that we have to answer from the dais is this project better than what it was? Is there an overall benefit to the residents of Little Falls with the redevelopment, more so than there would be without it? And that's what we had to answer. As far as Valley, I want to just address that briefly, because I recall that meeting specifically. I remember listening to all of the questions. The variances that that developer was seeking for that particular project were so nominal, it was incredible. I was floored by the fact that he was able to fit the density that he was in that site. In fact, as you know, I think one of the only variances that he really had to do with a couple of feet of a setback in the entire project. So to say a project is approved without even coming before the planner, many people in town build without coming before the planning board. Many people build as of right. And the point is, had he changed the lot by about 4 feet from where the building was going to be, he would not have even needed to come before the planning board. So the point is this, what he asked for in a variance was nominal. And that's based upon a plan and a redevelopment, a transit village zone that was approved before I was mayor and they were council.
Jim, you're taking everything as criticism.
No, I'm not. Like I said, I'm just having the discussion.
You're on the committee, and you're on the planning board, and Tony is too. When a project comes before you, and they want 54 units because they say, this is what it is, and you say, 54 doesn't look good. It isn't good. I'm not going to give you a variance. That's what a variance is for.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to give it, you put 52 or you put 50. All right? What's he going to say? He says, well, I paid so much for this land. That's his problem. That's his problem. It's not the township's problem.
Sure. And again, I don't disagree with you. And again, that's where that balance, that fine line comes in. The variance was nominal, and there's case law as to whether or not planning board should or shouldn't consider relief. And this is one of those things where when it is nominal, you risk being sued. You risk, much like we saw on the Abbey site and the old, where now the 24 units of Autumn Point are. The town, because of, a number of years ago, not approving sites, developers brought actions in Superior Court. And they prevailed on applications that were even more dense than they would have gotten had they come before this planning board and gotten the relief sought. So the point being this, we risk the fact that a developer files in Superior Court and gets an application or an approval for a more dense unit than they were even seeking. Again, happened on both the Abbey site as well as the Campana site which is now Autumn Point. So that's why, again, I get what you're saying, but everybody needs to be conscientious that the township doesn't get sued, spend council fees, and then end up with a more dense project.
Also, you're thinking you're going to get sued. You don't know. And as an attorney, that's all you're worried about, the suit. I'm telling you, when a person goes in for a variance, that is not to be sued for. He's supposed to put up so many units. That's up to the planning board, how many units goes there. It's not up to him. And because you cut down what he asked for 60, you give him 54, when it should be 52 maybe. So he's better off. It's like having raising a price and then having a sale.
So you're absolutely right. Liability from the township perspective is something I'm always conscientious of.
On Walnut Street, there's a big hole where they dug there. What is that? Right behind it?
That's Valley Bank.
Oh, that's the Valley Bank site.
Pardon?
That's the Valley Bank site.
Yeah, I know that. What is it being used for?
That's that same application that you're referring to. That's where that building is going to go.
What's going on top of the,
There's going to be parking, there's going to be subsurface parking, surface level parking, and 2 stories of residential.
on Main Street, the 2 stories?
And it backs up to, and it uses most of Center as well as Warren there.
The one into Warren Street?
Correct. The site backs up to Warren. So does that entire site that you're referring to, that many units are going into?
They're not building all the way to Warren Street. There's a
There's a
considerable
setback from Warren
setback.
Street, absolutely.
Yeah.
To where you see the hole now. In fact, there will be even further back because some of it will be subsurface all the way that far back.
Well, where is the parking underneath supposed to go there?
Where's the parking, I'm sorry?
Underneath, I thought it was under the bank.
Correct. It'll be right where you see that hole right now, cars will be parked underground there in the future.
How about, I thought it was under the bank.
No, the bank building currently where it is existing right now, no, it will not be under that portion of it.
Oh,
That will continue to face Main Street. And there won't be subsurface underneath that part of the building. It'll be, the subsurface parking will exist essentially from where the entrance is now, all the way back to Warren Street.
I understand. I thought they said that the underground parking was where the bank was going to be. And that's where the residents were complaining about water. And the builder.
Mayor, if I could interrupt you, Mayor.
It is
Schuler.
the entire site.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, because I listened in on that meeting as well. People were referring to being underneath the bank's, the property. I don't think they were referring to underneath the physical structure of the bank.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, no, I think that may have been a misunderstanding that night, but what they mean was the bank property.
They were talking about the elevator going underneath and bringing the garbage under there.
That's correct. Yeah, but it's the parking area. It's not the physical structure of the bank. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, what's going on when you have it, if you want density, you could have, my complaint was density on those properties. And my complaint is, if you're sitting on the planning board, because a person wants so many units, you have to take into consideration what's better for the town, not just financially, but for their looks and the aesthetics of the town. Now, you're talking about traffic. There won't create that much traffic, but what it would do, you only have one entrance in and out. When you make a left in there, that's going to back up. When you make a left in any other, it's going to back up, and that's where the traffic is. Little Falls always had traffic through Main Street because it's the only cutoff there is to go up to Cedar Grove or any of the other places.
I agree with you. And what I would turn your attention to is, for example, the mill, or even Inwood for that matter. Inwood has I forget the exact number, 300 and some odd units at Inwood. There's 320 some odd units here at the mill. If you look at Inwood, I don't think anyone says there is so much traffic coming in and out of Inwood. And there's more vehicles and more units at Inwood than we're talking about even at the Singac redevelopment site here. My point being this, yes.
And they're all townhouses.
That's right. And they're all 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes there, 2 bedrooms. So the point being this, I agree with you, it's dense, but I don't believe that the impacts that you are most concerned with are necessarily going to come to fruition and negatively impact the town.
The street is so, all right, I'm talking about egress going in. When there's going to be a left-hand turn, that's where the traffic backs up on the mill. People making the left-hand turn in there, they can't make it because traffic coming down. They have to stop, and that's what it does. And it's going to compound there because once you go over the tracks, you're going to be putting how many more units there? The 50 something.
That's about 60 units there.
Yeah. So it's a lot of.
Right.
That doesn't enter and exit on Main Street.
Pardon?
That will not enter and exit on Main Street.
Well,
No, they're going to go out towards 23.
And Mayor, the Abbey is right up the street.
pardon?
The Abbey, the new development, the Abbey it's on Center Ave. It's right up the street.
I'm not talking about development, son. You want.
No, I understand, but you're talking about the ingress and egress to the building that we're discussing. So up the street is the Abbey. The Abbey is 50, 2 and 3 bedroom units as opposed to 1 and 2 bedroom units. I drive down Center Ave all the time. I've never once seen traffic backed up at the Abbey because of residents of the Abbey having trouble getting out onto Center Ave. It's the same road. They're going to be entering and leaving the same roadway.
What are you going to do on Lackawanna Avenue?
There's nothing right now pending. Oh, I'm sorry. There is something pending. It's been carried for a year.
60, yeah, there's no egress in there.
Wait, where are you referring to?
Lackawanna Avenue. Up at the only little piece you have.
The little piece at the top of Lackawanna by Route 46?
Yeah.
Yeah, that developer doesn't even own 50% of the land he's talking about. It's owned by like the DOT or something. There's that project, as far as I'm concerned right now, is essentially, it's Jackson, I think it's Jackson Street Jackson Road in Little Falls. That project, as far as I'm concerned right now, essentially doesn't even exist. But I will tell you, you don't talk about a project that's not going to add a bit of traffic to the downtown of Little Falls. That's one of them. They are literally on the furthest corner of Little Falls there.
It'll impact because you can only go, there was a fire in there and the fire truck's going to go in there.
Yeah, under the current, the way it's designed now. Again, that developer has big plans that I don't know will ever come to fruition. He needs a lot of approvals from the state and the county to even get back before the planning board here in Little Falls.
So my recommendation is get a health officer for having a meeting. You owe it to the public to let you know what's going on. I don't want to hear, I did this or I did that. The public deserves it. That's why you're up there. I don't care how many hours you put in there, because if you don't want to put the hours in, you don't run and you don't serve.
I agree with you, Mr. Schubert. The one thing to our point earlier here too is you said, there was always a report given at council meetings. I don't know how many people you had at council meetings when you were mayor here. I can tell you we have one, Mr. Fernandez. So my point being this.
There are some people who attend online.
My
Mayor.
point-
Let's not negate their involvement.
But my point being this. The information, there are so many better ways to share information in 2022 than there were in 1972. Email being the first one that comes to mind. And that's why we use the email blast to disseminate information, because it's instantaneous and it can go to anyone that may possibly want it.
Does it still hurt to have an officer? You do try. That's up to you.
No, again,
How many
but
people get the email? What is it going to do? I don't know. The thing is to try and reach as many people as you can get.
I don't
It's the same
disagree.
thing as when you advertise in a paper which is legal about you're coming up for variance, or how many people read the paper, especially today? And how many people?
Well, nowadays,
Proper way of doing it.
one person posts on social media and the entire town knows. So seems to be much more expeditious
Thank
than posting in the paper nowadays.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. Thank you. Franz Schultz? Thank you.
She's been very patient.
Thank
Franz
you.
Schultz, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay. The
Nope,
floor
she's
is-
I
muted.
think you just muted her.
Ms. Schultz, you can unmute again, sorry.
The floor is yours.
Thank you for giving me a little bit extra time. There are a couple of things that have been coming up with the various people talking that I wanted to both comment on and ask a couple of questions on. And sorry to get back to the traffic thing. The point I was trying to make, which I probably didn't make very clearly, was that if there already is traffic in Little Falls, regardless of its source, what would be the consequences to that traffic of the additional units? And I was wondering if the traffic studies that were done took that made any projections as to how the additional roughly 500 units, once they're fully occupied, will have on the traffic throughout Little Falls. Certainly, they make some estimates because the traffic plan that they write is designed on the current traffic patterns within the areas. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
I would just
Councilman
comment to
Quaddi?
say that the source does matter because currently the source of the traffic is going to expire when the construction is finished. So the source does matter. It's not regardless of the source. The source has to be considered as to what is the cause of the traffic, because, we make decisions up here that have ramifications long-term. The taxpayers of Little Falls deserve to be cared for long-term. And that's what our intention is. And by ignoring the concerns of the taxpayers because there's a temporary project happening and it causes a temporary inconvenience would be to ignore the real concerns of the taxpayers that before smart and responsible development was occurring, taxes were skyrocketing in Little Falls.
So I'm not challenged. Again, I think you didn't really address the question that I asked. But that's okay. One of the questions I did have was comments I wanted to make is I appreciated Mr. Murphy saying, the community was small and quaint, needs growth. And without that growth, it doesn't survive. And I absolutely agree with that. But I also don't agree that you need to shoehorn in as many units as possible. It does affect the aesthetic. It starts to make the town feel claustrophobic, and at least for me. And I think, and there's a lack of additional green space being added in with these buildings, which makes the quality of life for the individuals who are there compromised. One of the great things about the mill, which you seem to have some negative feelings about, that's you're entitled to, is that we have this wonderful green space between us and the river that's a park, that's part of our community. And I think that some of these other people who are moving into these new complexes deserve the same kind of beauty that we have.
Ms. Schultz, I don't think there's any negative connotation about the mill. I think there's just been references to that area of the town. No different than when the, if you want to call it the high rise that went up at the mill. I'm sure the residents at that time said, "Oh, this is changing Little Falls." Is it 9 stories, that unit?
It is 9 stories, and there were certainly some complaints at the time.
Yeah, a 9-story unit that went up in a quote that everyone says small town. I don't know how many towns have a 9-story building in it, but we do. And people in that building don't move out. They enjoy living there. They enjoy parking at that massive parking lot that their cars don't get rain and snow on. They enjoy living in that type of building, and that's fine. For other people to say that's, I don't like it, they're right, they're entitled to that opinion. At the time, the planning board and those that were on council approved that project. And that project seemed to have worked very well for the township of Little Falls. But having said that, Mayor, would you like to comment on the units? of
Sure.
traffic?
One comment that I heard was the green space. And I'd venture to say that almost every single project that has been approved here in Little Falls has actually increased green space and decreased impervious surface. I think that stands true for almost every single major development that we've seen here in town. That stands true for the Valley site. That stands true for the Singac redevelopment site. That stands true for almost every single site. And what's important to note is this, is that under current New Jersey DEP regulations, no development is permitted to occur without reducing or having zero additional runoff than currently exists from that site. So there is no development that has been approved here in Little Falls that has increased water to our waterways during the time of a storm. Now, a lot of them are required to maintain that on site, and it will slowly trickle and make its way to waterways over time, because whether it be essentially leach fields where the water will be held in a water retention basin and slowly dripped out, or whether it be pipes leading to our waterways, the pipe size of the water going to the waterway cannot be increased under current DEP regulations. So nothing that has been approved in Little Falls can ultimately add more water to our waterways, at least quickly, during any sort of storm event. Bless you.
I'd like to add something about the green space. Thank you, at the mill. And I'm sorry that you're misunderstanding our posture about the mill development. In fact, what we're not saying, we don't have a negative view of the mill. What we're saying is that I think everybody in Little Falls views the mill now as a part of the community that we accept and we enjoy, and we're glad that the people are here. I don't think there's any connotation that that is not the case. What we're actually saying is that over time, once the initial surprise of one development replacing an armpit of Little Falls is over, once that wears off, that development will too be accepted, just like Inwood, the Brownstone Apartments, the Park Ave Apartments, and the mill. Further, you're enjoying your park-like area in the mill, and I appreciate that you have that. But your developer built a 9-story building so that you could have that park-like area. Now, I venture to guess that if we had proposed that the area in the Singac redevelopment should be a 9-story building with a lot of grass around it, people would have said there's no place for that in Little Falls. There's no place for it. They would have actually forgotten that there already is one, and they would have said, why aren't you putting
And
it?
you're projecting that onto this. Maybe people would have appreciated a 9-story building.
I am admittedly projecting that on, that it is my belief that townhomes are more palatable than high rises in downtown Little Falls.
Well, you might, again, we'll never know. But part of my reason for saying that was because, you made this reference to the mill being built right on the street. And it isn't. There is one structure at the mill that is even close to the street. And that's so close to the street that it even has trees between the building and the sidewalk. So I didn't know where that was coming from.
Decks
Right,
that are close to the
and
street.
to say that there's green space between the sidewalk and the building, that would have also stood very, very true for the Singac redevelopment project, but for there being a massive utility underneath the sidewalk in that section of the redevelopment zone.
Thank you for sharing that information. I also wanted to apologize. I would not be able to meet with you tomorrow. I have a prior commitment at 1:45, so I can't meet with you to look at the traffic. I had one other quick question that's on a completely different subject.
I'm sorry, Ms. Schultz, we didn't hear that last state part.
I have one more quick question that's on a completely different subject, which has to do with the Peckman River flood tunnel. And I was wondering, when the Corps of Engineers is done, will there still be a river channel there with flowing water for people to look at?
Sure. So great question that you raised regarding the Peckman River flood tunnel project. It is going to be designed as an overflow when the water level rises to a point where the current, I guess, where the water flow increases more than it is on a regular, slow-running day, but it will then overflow into this flood culvert out to the Passaic River. So the river, as you see it now, if you were to stand in Woodland Park further downstream and watch the river, I would venture to say with 99% certainty that if you were to stand there now and on a day like this, after weather like this, once it's completed, the flow of the river will be substantially similar. The Army Corps, one of the major concerns and one of the major branches that they employ in developing these types of things is not affecting wildlife. And I would venture to say that in the event they basically cut the Peckman River off at the Little Falls DPW building and didn't send any of it further downstream, it would have a major impact to potential wildlife. And that is something that would never have been approved in that form. So yes, the river in its slow babbling stage, as it looks so nice so often, will not be impacted further downstream. It's that raging river that when it really rises in elevation will overflow into this channel and down through the Peckman flood tunnel culvert out to the Passaic River, which, by the way, I'm asking for updates from the Army Corps now. I do still anticipate it's not 2 years, it's probably still 2 years until there's a real shovel in the ground. So unfortunately, moving as slow as every major government project does, but hopefully hoping for some resolution soon.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz.
Thank you.
Mr. Fernandez,
Yes,
last speaker. Go ahead.
I want to agree with each gentleman that brought up a good point. That if we have ordinances in town, we have a planning board. Why don't they build according to the regulations that are in the existing regulations? Why do we have to go through variances and all that in order to build a bigger building? I myself went to a couple of planning board meetings, and in one case, the gentleman, I'm not going to mention his name or anything, he was asking for 11 variances. He left the meeting with 13. The project right across from the fire station. If we go according to the local laws, I don't think he could have built. I was at the meeting. I don't know exactly how many he's going to be. The height is going to be extremely more than usual. The parking spaces cannot accommodate all the residents, and he's asking for a pilot program. He's also asking for a pilot program for different things. So why do we have ordinances in place? It seems that the ordinances that are in place only accommodate the little residents like us. The big builder, when he comes into town, all he has to do is money, show the money, and whether it's a pilot, or a grant to Mother Teresa, the project gets done. Just to give you an idea, you mentioned the mills. You're constantly mentioning the mills. Was the mills built with pilot programs? Was the other one, the mills, the Inwood, built with pilot programs? No. The builder adopted the local ordinances and bought.
Mr. Fernandez, I'm going to bring to your attention one very important factor.
Okay.
I can promise you that when Inwood was built, there wasn't $24.5 million worth of previously developed property that had to be purchased to develop on. Similarly, the mill. When the mill was developed, they were purchasing grass. It was vacant land, a very much different consideration in this process. Again, the other issues that you're talking about of the little guys never get help. Do you know how many single family residential applications we have had before the planning board in the past number of years?
No.
I can tell you more than redevelopment, major projects like this. And guess what we do? If reasonable, the planning board accommodates those requests. What you are suggesting is that there be no reason for planning boards in the United States.
No.
You are, because if everybody had to build in accordance with what was required by the ordinances, there is no reason to have a planning board. And that's what you're suggesting, that everybody no matter how big or small, build as of right.
No, what I'm suggesting and what I'm a firm believer is that if the law says this is it.
So
It's
to your
not
point,
going to the right or going
there
to the left.
is no reason
It's
for
a
planning
straight
board
line.
then.
It is a straight line. It's
Mr.
very-
Fernandez, we have to, so let me try to clear this up a little bit. When we say straight line, someone will come before the planning board and want to put in a built-in pool, but they're short 1.5 feet of land.
Make it
Now,
smaller.
well, here's the thing, they come and they say, does it really matter? Maybe where it's backing up, it backs up to a railroad track. That's up to the planning board to decide if they want to grant that variance for those reasons. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. That's why you have a planning board. It's open to the public. Public members can attend it and have their input. But nothing's done the way you're saying. On Patterson Avenue, that project has been, let me finish, sir. That project has been in the making of like for 5-6 years of going back and forth. And that's a redevelopment project. So that comes under different standards.
Can,
Yeah,
also,
Councilman Quaddy.
you implied that the mill was built under the standing ordinances in town. There's no way that there was an ordinance in town that allowed for a 9-story structure to be built without going before the council or the board. And it was industrial, it wasn't even residential.
Zoning laws only existed in Little Falls since the 1970s.
Mhm.
Things constructed prior to that were just built. There was no zone at the time when many of what is now Little Falls was developed.
All I,
But the mill was built when there was zoning, and it was not zoned residential. So but you're implying that, oh, well, why don't you just do it the way they did it? They conformed. No, they went and asked the governing body to be allowed to build that. And the governing body in place at the time allowed it. They did not build according to the 3-story ordinance that's on the books. It's absurd to think that they did.
all I can tell you is that you make it sound like we, the residents,
Mhm.
and by the residents, I mean 99.9% of the population, most of us do not believe in going in front of the planning board. I wouldn't.
If you don't believe in the notion of a planning board, there's nothing I can do to convince you that's the way government works.
See the things that I see at the planning.
Wait, you don't believe in the process, that's fine.
Because
It's
of
your
the-
right to not believe in the process, sir.
That you want to jam a 72-story apartment building in a place where only 50.
We didn't jam a 72-story apartment building anyway.
You know, let me finish.
No, I'm not gonna let you say that we put a 72-story apartment building in.
According to the laws, it says that you gotta have X amount of parking space for each apartment, and you are short 40 spaces. Make the building smaller. It's very simple. But if you make the building smaller, the contractor, the builder doesn't make money. The owner doesn't make money. And that's what the planning board is all about, making money for somebody.
No, that's not what the planning board is all about.
That's what you think.
That's
Why don't we
correct.
why don't we ask most of the residents?
Sir, you don't represent most of the residents. You represent yourself.
I never said I did.
You just said you did.
I don't react.
You said, in fact, you said you represent 99.9% of the residents. I don't remember you representing anyone but yourself. If those are your beliefs, that's fine. But not everyone shares the belief that if they want to be able to put in a swimming pool a little bit closer to their setback, that there shouldn't be a board in place to consider that application and decide what the impact is on the community and whether or not it should proceed. It's perfectly acceptable that you believe that, but it does not represent the views of the majority of people just because you believe it.
That's, we tend to disagree.
We frequently do.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
That's what makes us great.
I just want to add one thing. If somebody had come up with a 3-dimensional drawing of that monstrosity on Main Street and asked the citizens of Little Falls, we wish to have it, would have said no. You don't like the way it looks. I understand everything you've said about the finances and what have you. It's way over my head, way out of my area of expertise. I think what a lot of us are saying is we don't like it.
Mr. Scherzer, if I may.
We don't.
that
Oh, now, let me just finish one more thing. And the other thing that we don't like is government that's not transparent and it's not a democracy. Okay? I'm not talking about a planning board versus a township committee or what have you. I'm talking about the citizens of this town. Had you asked us, did we wish to have this thing on Main Street? I think 90+% would have said no.
Mr. Scherzer,
Again,
that exact opportunity existed
several times.
several times. Several times before this mayor and council, and several times before the planning board. Every single meeting was open to the public.
I think we
A photo of exactly what you are referring to was put on display here in this room for every person in Little Falls to look at, to comment on, and to be heard. For you to sit here and say, had we seen a photo, we would have said no. That exact opportunity existed. Mr. Ratney was at the meetings. He joined several of them. Many residents joined the meetings and witnessed it. Many residents saw the exact photo that you are saying you wish you had the opportunity to see. It existed. If residents don't like what they see now, it is a mirror of what was presented to this council and to the planning board on probably 10 occasions. So to sit here and say you didn't have an opportunity to do something that you absolutely did is disingenuous.
I didn't say that. And by the way, periodically, I feel like I'm in a courtroom. So I'd like you to take a deep breath and let me just express a point of view, okay? There are different ways of communicating to citizens. Clearly, many of us, certainly me, did not understand what was going on, did not attend a meeting and what have you. All I'm trying to tell you now is if the majority of people in this town really saw it, I'm not saying you didn't give them an opportunity here and there. I think that you would find that most people don't like it if you ask people.
Right, but
If you went out of your way, you sent out something recently, which I thought was really pretty. It was the Damiano team on a American flag. Nobody appreciates the American flag more than I. I served in the Army for 6 years. If that kind of communication went out to every single mailbox and said, here's what this thing looks like, and gave us an easy way of saying what we think, I think you would have found something different. There's a lot of controversy about how people, balloting and voting and what have you, okay? You need to make it easier for people to express their point of view.
Mr. The issue is, and I get what you're saying, the issue is it would become almost economically impossible every time there's an application before the planning board to send a photo to everyone in town saying, give me your opinion.
This is a particular development.
we're also,
that is above and beyond the typical type of thing that you get. And what I'm suggesting to you is if you have the ability as a group of people, it was a great thing you sent down.
We don't have that ability though.
Whatever it was, you have the ability of communicating. You have the ability, police department does a great job. I get a phone call that says, the snow is coming, don't park on the street. There are ways to communicate to people to
That's in
make
an
sure the
emergency.
information gets through. All I'm telling you is I had no idea, okay? Maybe my fault. I didn't know what was being built. And I'm telling you, it looks like a monstrosity. So whatever the process was, the end result is it doesn't look good. I'm not talking about the economics of it. I'm talking about the aesthetics of
but
it.
we have to consider the economics of it as well.
Of course.
It's easy to take the one part that you don't like and stand up here and comment on it. But we don't get to design the building. We have to take into account the little guy that Mr. Fernandez is thinking about, the person whose doorbell we ring and we say and says, please help us to stabilize taxes. You, sir, don't have to consider that. We have to consider that. When you drive down the street and say, I don't like that building,
Of course.
we have to consider the benefit that went along with that building, as well as the aesthetics of it
Of
and
course
the
you do.
balance between those things.
course.
And you're standing at a meeting that 6 years ago didn't exist. The mayor asked for it. I sat in that seat and I watched him ask for 2 more meetings to be added in the summer. The meeting didn't exist until he won his role as mayor. He was on the council at the time. you're accusing us of not being transparent enough. This meeting was literally created as a council meeting by the people that were elected up here. And further, it was converted into a meeting where we opened our doors and welcomed people to come and comment on what's going on in town. And you're accusing us of not being transparent. And I challenge you, sir, to look at the alternative to what was going on before we were in office.
I feel like I'm addressing your court.
No, Mr. Scherzo, but let me just go back to the fact of what you said about big projects, because people have that, that's why Trenton has a gazillion lobbyists to alert industries of things that go on. By law, everything was done that could be done. We cannot arbitrarily say and spend taxpayers' monies and send out a project to taxpayers. That's against the law. That means somebody else would have to get the same due respect. That doesn't happen. What happens is that it goes through the process of what we've done. That's it. We can't arbitrarily say we have to alert the public. That would be against the law.
It's never against the law.
Yes, it is, sir. Yes, it is, sir. We follow the law here. That's why we have a planning board attorney. That's why we have a municipal attorney. We follow the law, sir.
You're telling me it would be against the law to have done a better job letting the citizens know we've done it. By the way.
No,
When you
it's
say
against
better
law to-
job,
It would be
Mr.
against the law to
Mr.
hold a
Scherzo,
referendum on a
Mr.
project.
When you're saying
That's
better
what you're
job,
asking
that's
for.
objective.
I'm not
Because
trying-
we did the job,
No,
that we did whatever we could do under the letter of the law.
All right, so you're asking for a referendum on a project.
I'm asking for public input.
There was public input.
And
The
I'm
fact that
trying-
you're not paying attention is not our fault.
Am I in a courtroom?
Mm,
You let me
No,
finish.
no,
What
but-
what I'm trying to tell you is we don't like the project.
When you say we.
You don't like the project.
Right, right.
Let's do this, 1 second. By a show of hands, how many people think this project is a monstrosity? By the way, I don't know most.
Okay,
By show of hands, how many people came together tonight?
exactly.
So it's like, come on, it's like.
Come on, Mr. Scherzo, let's be real here. Come on, we can pack this chambers with a lot of people with the opposite view. Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Seaver, there's a gentleman that hasn't spoken and he deserves the right to speak. Yeah, he's behind you.
Behind you, Mayor, behind you, Mayor, behind you.
Hello, Joseph Basales, how you doing?
Good evening.
First off, thank you for your time. Thank you for this meeting. Thanks for having us. Are there going to be more meetings open to the people like this?
There's going to be one more scheduled.
Every meeting is open to the public.
Every meeting.
Well, more like this
So-
style.
There'll be one more town hall
Next
meeting
month.
next month.
Can we do more than that once a quarter?
No, I don't think so. I don't think.
The
because we
issue
have
is,
business.
we're not getting
Right.
township business approved tonight.
Right.
We are simply, again, opening the doors to have conversations. I don't disagree that town halls can happen more regularly, but I don't know that they should necessarily replace council meetings
No, of course.
as we have. And I've hosted town halls in the past on a number of occasions. That I'm willing to absolutely consider doing at least quarterly, for sure, to have conversations.
Quarterly or twice a year is, I think, so.
That would be something that the mayor would run, but this council body, doing the course of business that have to be approved by having a town hall meeting like this, certain businesses are delayed then. So, and ordinances are delayed. But listen, we're always up for consideration and to see if we can fit another one in, maybe in the fall. That's a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And the floor here is only open to 25 attendees. Is that correct still or no?
No,
Has
No.
many- Okay, that's
No.
gone,
Yep.
right?
it's been gone for several months.
Oh, excellent, great. Okay, and just something different, more on a simple note. The parking at the ShopRite has been getting horrendous. I don't know if we patrol that on a regular basis. Saturday was, of course, it was a Saturday, summertime. Several cars parked in the fire zones, car parked in the crosswalk, blocking the cart return. It was
If I may,
ridiculous.
Chief, do we have Title 39 there?
No.
So the township,
Fire zone of fire ordinance.
okay, the fire zone can be ticketed by ordinance because vehicles are not permitted to be parked there by ordinance. That is private property. And because it's private property, without them providing the municipality, it's called Title 39, the township is not permitted to just go there and say, I don't like where you're parked, here's a ticket. If the property owner calls to report a violation on their property, then the township can go there and enforce. But otherwise, that is private property for all intents and purposes. I don't disagree with you that parking there can be an absolute nightmare at times. I avoid that place like the plague on Saturdays if I can help it.
6 a.m.
He goes at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
But the point here is that the Little Falls Police Department cannot just, as part of the regular patrols, patrol through there and find individuals parked over lines and issue parking violations.
Okay, wasn't sure about that. Okay. And then just, I agree with what a lot of these gentlemen said. What's done is done with the buildings. Some of these were approved before you guys got in, but, please consider with the next projects that are coming up with, what was it, Kirk's Tire, and now there's the empty pit on the corner of Stevens and Main. The people hate it, all right? It's not just these guys, it's not just us, it's not just them. I've spoken to hundreds of people in town, believe it or not, over the last 10 months. Everybody hates it, okay? And I understand sometimes your hands are tied because you approved one, you can't deny this one, you'll get sued. But don't approve the variances. And, I know you came down several hundred units to 287, whatever it was. If the developer has to suffer, let him suffer. You'll find one that will build with less units.
But see, you've raised an interesting point. You said if the developer has to suffer, let them suffer.
Well, okay, so
no,
he doesn't
no, I'm
pay
gonna-
20 million.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if a developer walks out of Little Falls having lost money. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. The issue is this. If there's not some dollar sign that they foresee at the end of a project based upon the numbers that they crunch, and they have a lot of good people who are very good at numbers, the project just does not happen.
Right.
So to say that 287 should have been cut to 140, again, the balance was, does the project just not happen? And we are stuck with an industrial complex that could have 18-wheelers coming in and out of it every day, or rats running around the town, or garbage flying everywhere from Rainbow Caterers? Or do we approve what was before us after negotiating for months and months and months and looking at projected numbers as to what will be generated by a developer at the conclusion of a project? That's the balance. Again, I don't disagree with you. If it could have been half of the density and the numbers would have worked, I certainly would have pushed for that. Looking at the projections, the math simply didn't add up.
All I can say is try harder next time. The people don't like it. And, I know you say it's not going to cause more traffic and it's not going to clog our schools. I've seen other towns say the same thing. And then 5 years after it's all built, there's tons of traffic. The schools are clogged. They got to build another school. They got to build another fire.
Which towns?
It's been all over.
No. You said you saw towns. Which towns?
Which specific ones?
Bloomfield and other towns more south. People I've spoken to over the years. So I don't recall exactly which ones. Yeah, I don't have my.
So you're saying Bloomfield has been overdeveloped?
That's one of the towns I would say.
Okay, well,
It's
look,
not
you
as
can
bad
look
as
into
others.
the Bloomfield numbers.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as others, but because I used to travel a lot and I see it everywhere. And it's, because you don't.
Let me ask something, Joe. Have you seen any towns deteriorate?
In my eyes, yeah.
Yeah.
Every town.
I have too. And you know what I see when they're deteriorating? Old buildings that nobody redeveloped.
I see it with new buildings.
You're 100% right, Mr. Fernandez. You are 100% right. That old buildings that deteriorate because of bad government that doesn't have a foresight for the future to renew old buildings and old businesses and bring in new ratables that help the taxpayers deteriorate. Thank you.
And I can agree with that, but to a lesser extent, smaller.
You don't get the choice. But the point is that we're trying to make is you don't get the choice. And I don't mean you, I mean we as a body don't get the choice. You discuss a project until the developer is about to walk away, and then it's yes or no. You don't get the choice to say, I wish it looked differently. I wish it was 5 feet back. You don't get those choices. You negotiate and you discuss those ideas along the way. But at some point, you hit a drop dead point and we say, should the Little Falls residents pay $1.3 million a year to keep Rainbow Caterers in place? And we said no.
Do you have any other questions, sir?
Yeah, that covers it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for coming out.
Mayor?
Is there any parameters or lot size or how many units per acre? Where?
Absolutely. Each and every zone has that defined essentially.
You have it all defined, okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't know.
Does the Transit Village mayor have a density? I don't think the Transit Village does.
Transit Village Central Business District does not have a density, but it has parking requirements. It has it has height requirements. It has setback requirements. So it has all of those things.
Okay. Number one other thing. There's just one person bought that property?
Which property,
are you
Mayor?
referring to?
The,
Singac redevelopment?
Singac redevelopment project? At the time that the project was purchased, it was purchased by one entity. That entity has since sold the project as approved to two separate entities who are now developing, one developing the townhomes, one developing the multifamily.
At this time, can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Albanese? Yeah, I mean to close both of you.
Somebody brought up the fact that how many people were allowed. James notified me how many. I didn't know it was going to be open. That the restrictions were off. The question I
No
have
idea.
is, do you still have restrictions that the public is not allowed on the planning board meetings? Is that still just?
The planning board
that-
chairman has elected to continue to have those virtually, but there's no limit as to how many people can
No,
attend.
I mean, if we have this, the council meetings with 25, or this, and this particular situation is open to many more than 25, why don't we have people in the planning board meetings as opposed to just via computer and Zoom?
The chairman of the planning board has opted not to hold public
Well,
meetings.
what is the?
That's his prerogative.
If it's good enough for you guys.
Well, no, I can explain part of the logic.
Okay.
Frankly, planning board meetings virtually are, in my opinion, almost easier to have. And I'll tell you why. The applicants share their screen and can show everybody that's watching the exact lines that they're referring to, the photos that they have up on the screen, the setbacks, the variances, everything. Where I'm sure you've seen, as you come to meetings and developers put up a little easel with a 24-inch photo, and there's people in the back of the room, it turns into a disaster when everybody's trying to look at the same little easel that the planning board members are attempting to look at. I will tell you, I have actually found that planning board meetings virtually, having a shared screen, having it on my screen in front of my face, everybody viewing the exact same thing, has made them even easier than they are in person.
Easier on whom?
Easier on
Planning
whom?
board members or the
The
public?
planning board and the public. The public is able to view exactly what is being viewed by the planning board. Again, I have no objection, my personally, obviously, to being in person. And I have the plans in front of me as a planning board member that are in a packet, so I have no issue. But again, for members of the public, I think it's almost been made easier to be able to sit at home and look at the exact same plan that everybody's looking at.
But Mr. Albanese, I would go to the next planning board and make that sentiment known.
And the other thing is that you mentioned something about the traffic situation. I don't want to go over the whole thing. I mean, you've explained as best you can, and we're going to have to wait and see, basically. But you mentioned something about what would you rather have? An Amazon warehouse here? My question is, did you ever have any thought, did Amazon ever come and say, gee, I'd love that property so close to 46 and Route 3? And, I mean, did you ever have that? Did they ever express an interest in putting a warehouse there?
In that particular location?
Yeah.
No, Amazon in particular did not.
Well, any place that would brought in as many.
Sure. Yes, there were a couple of businesses who were looking to convert the use of some of them. In fact, until the day it was essentially closed on by the by JMF Properties, who purchased all of the lots.
Right.
There was a site there that had 18-wheelers coming in and out of it, and they were looking to expand the use.
Okay. I was just interested because, you just kind of like threw us a little curveball.
One of my 100 photos, I'm sure, has a bunch of 18-wheelers backed up in a small
Well, I
parking
no
lot.
doubt about it.
And I'm sure you've seen it.
An Amazon thing like they
And
have over.
I use that as an example to say that there could have been dozens of 18-wheelers coming in and out.
Some feelers.
And Mr.
I have
Adams,
another site for
you do
Amazon.
realize that Amazon did build a very large warehouse facility right
Yeah.
near here. So I think that, right. So I think that
No,
that's,
I understand.
that's why the comparison. I
It could have been a very
Okay.
realistic
That's my
possibility.
point.
I'm just wondering whether or
Right.
not, you were running,
I think that's the impetus for the comparison, is that
Okay.
actually happened
Right.
on another lot nearby.
well, fine. That's what you answered my
It
question.
was not far-fetched.
At this time, can I have a motion to close the public?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Quattie, second by Councilmember Vanchery. All those in favor of closing the public do so by signifying aye. All
Aye.
those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vanchery,
Second.
second by Councilmember Quattie. All those in favor of adjourning this meeting do so by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. This meeting is now closed.